You have got to be kidding me. HQ sent us a babysitting job for Christmas. Petty Officer Briggs laughed straight into the 18-year-old girl's face, and the whole room laughed with him. Nobody stood up for her. Nobody said a word. They saw the small frame, the young face, the rifle bigger than she was, and they decided she was a joke before she'd spoken a single word. Ava Carter just stood there in the doorway silent, letting them mock her, because she already knew something they didn't. In 72 hours, every man laughing at her would owe her his life, and she would collect that debt on Christmas Eve. Before we go any further, if you love stories about the ones nobody believed in, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from, because I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me tell you exactly what happened that night. The wind came off the mountains like it had a personal grudge against the base. It rattled the metal walls of the operations building, screamed under the doors, and buried everything outside under a fresh coat of white that just kept falling. Inside, the men of SEAL Team 7 were crowded around a long table, coffee going cold in their hands, watching the clock, and pretending they didn't care what day it was. But they cared. Every one of them cared. It was December 23rd, 2 days from Christmas, and instead of being home with their families, they were staring down the barrel of the most dangerous convoy mission the unit had run all year. "Route runs through the valley," Staff Sergeant Mason Reed said, tapping the map spread across the table. "2 clicks of open ground, then we thread the needle through the mountain pass. In and out. Supplies to the forward outpost, then we come home." "Come home," Jake Turner repeated, and a couple of the guys chuckled. "That's a funny word for it, Sarge. Nobody's coming home. We're coming back to this frozen box, which is not the same thing." "You want to file a complaint," Reed said without looking up. "There's a form for that. Lines on the left-right next to the guys who care." That got a laugh. Reed had a way of doing that, cutting the tension without ever raising his voice. He'd been running teams for 11 years, and there wasn't a man in that room who wouldn't follow him straight into the fire. He was the kind of leader who never asked for anything he wouldn't do himself, and every single one of them knew it. Across the table, Lieutenant Marcus Hale cleared his throat. He was the commander, the officer, the one who answered to the people above them, and he wore that weight in the lines around his eyes. "There's one more thing," and he said. "HQ is sending us an attachment, arriving tonight." The room shifted. An attachment meant an extra body, an extra gun, an extra set of hands for a mission that was already stretched thin. "About time," said Petty Officer Briggs. He was the loud one, the one who always had something to say, and half the time, what he said got under people's skin, whether he meant it to or not. "We could use another operator. Who are they sending? Somebody good, I hope. We don't have room for dead weight out there." "Doesn't say," Hale admitted, reading off the tablet in his hand. "Just says Specialist Overwatch qualified and to give them full cooperation." "Overwatch," David Kim said, perking up. He was the youngest of the core team, quiet, careful, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. "So, a sniper. Good. If we're getting ambushed in that pass, I want eyes up high." "Now you're talking," Briggs said. "Bet you it's one of those old ghost guys. The ones who've been doing this since before we were born. Steady hands, dead eyes, doesn't say a word for 3 days, and then puts a round through a keyhole at 800 meters. He grinned. "That's what we need, a legend." Reed didn't say anything. He just watched the door. Because that was the thing about Mason Reed. He never assumed. He'd seen too many missions go sideways because somebody decided they already knew the answer before the question showed up. So while the other men painted pictures in their heads of the grizzled veteran walking through that door, Reed kept his opinion in his pocket, where it belonged, and he waited. The wind screamed again, and then the door opened. For a second, nobody moved. The cold rushed in, first a wave of it, snow swirling around the boots that stepped through the threshold. And then the boots stopped, and the door swung shut, and the room got a good long look at the attachment HQ had sent them. She couldn't have been more than 5'6", slight build, a face that hadn't fully finished growing into itself yet, cheeks still soft, eyes wide and steady, and far too calm for someone standing in a room full of hardened operators who were all staring at her like she'd wandered in off the street. She had a rifle slung across her back, a long precision rifle in a hard case, and it looked almost comically large against her frame. And she was young, painfully obviously young. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then Briggs laughed. It started as a snort, like he was trying to hold it in and couldn't, and then it broke all the way open into a real laugh, loud and disbelieving. No, he said. No way. This is a joke, right? Somebody's messing with us. Briggs, Reed said quietly. But Briggs was already rolling. HQ, this is HQ's idea of a Christmas gift, a kid. What is she, 16? Did we adopt her? Are we running a mission or a field trip? A couple of the other men laughed. Not all of them, but enough. The girl didn't move. She stood just inside the door, snow melting off her shoulders, and she looked at Briggs the way you'd look at weather, like he was something happening in front of her that she had no intention of participating in. What's your name, kid? Briggs pressed, stepping closer, grinning. By now, you lost. You looking for the daycare because I think that's back at HQ. Ava Carter, she said. 2 words, flat, even, no shake in her voice, no nerves, nothing. Ava Carter, Briggs repeated, tasting the name like it was funny. And how old are you, Ava Carter? 18. The room erupted. Somebody whistled. Turner put his face in his hands. Briggs threw his arms out wide like he just won an argument. 18 years old. You hear that, boys? They sent us a teenager for the worst convoy of the year, in the worst storm in 3 years, on Christmas Eve. He spun to face Reed. Sarge, tell me you're gonna call this in. Tell me you're gonna get on the horn and tell HQ they mixed up our order. Reed didn't answer him. He was watching the girl. Because here's what Reed noticed, and what none of the others did not yet. When Briggs stepped into her space, when he raised his voice and threw his arms around and did everything he could to rattle her, she didn't flinch. Not a single muscle. Her eyes never left him. And it wasn't the frozen stillness of somebody too scared to move. It was something else, something colder. It was the stillness of somebody who had already measured the man in front of her, decided he was not a threat, and moved on. Reed had seen that stillness exactly twice before in his life. Both times it had been on men who'd survived things they never talked about. All right, that's enough, Reed said. And this time there was iron under it. The room quieted. He walked around the table and stopped in front of the girl, and up close she was even smaller than she'd looked from across the room and even calmer. Ava Carter, you're the overwatch specialist. Yes, Staff Sergeant. You have paperwork. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a folded packet, and handed it over without a word. Reed opened it. He read. And as he read, the amusement that had been hanging around the edges of his own face slowly drained away, and something more careful took its place. What's it say, Sarge? Turner asked. Reed didn't answer right away. He read to the end. Then he folded the packet closed and looked at the girl for a long moment. It says, he said slowly, that she's qualified. Sniper school, top of her class, overwatch certified. He paused. And that's all it says. The rest is redacted. The room went quiet in a different way now. Redacted, Kim said. That's weird. You don't redact a kid's file. You don't, Reed agreed. Briggs wasn't buying, said, come on. Redacted just means somebody spilled coffee on it. It doesn't mean anything. Sarge, look at her. She's a baby. She's going to get herself killed out there, or worse, she's going to get one of us killed trying to keep her alive. I'm not carrying a liability through that pass. Not on Christmas Eve. Not for anybody. And that right there was the moment the whole room turned to look at Ava Carter to see what she would say. Because Briggs had said the ugly thing out loud, the thing that a couple of the others were quietly thinking. That she wasn't an asset, that she was a burden, that having her out there would get somebody killed. Ava looked at Briggs. And then she spoke, and her voice was still that same flat, even calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made the hair on the back of a few necks stand up. You've been mocking me for 4 minutes, she said. In that time, you told everyone in this room 3 things about yourself. You told me you're afraid. You told me you cover it with noise. And you told me you've never actually watched somebody die who mattered to you, or you'd know better than to talk about it like it's a joke. The room went dead silent. Briggs's grin froze on his face. What did you just say to me? You heard me, Ava said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't step forward. She just held his eyes and did not blink. You want to know if I'm going to get you killed? The honest answer is I don't know. But I know I'm not the one in this room who's scared. And out there scared gets people killed a lot faster than young does. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Turner let out a low whistle. Okay, he said. Okay, she's got some teeth on her. But Briggs wasn't laughing anymore. His face had gone red and his jaw was tight, and for a moment it looked like he might do something stupid. He took a step toward her. "Briggs," Reed's voice cut across the room like a blade. "Sit down." Briggs stopped. He looked at Reed, he looked at the girl, and then slowly muttering something under his breath, he backed off and dropped into a chair. But he didn't take his eyes off her, and there was real anger in them now, the kind that doesn't cool down fast. Reed turned back to Ava. "That was a hell of a read," he said quietly. "You want to tell me where an 18-year-old learns to read a man like that?" Ava's eyes moved to him, and for just a fraction of a second, something crossed her face, something old and tired and heavy, before it was gone again, tucked away behind the calm. "Sniper school," she said. "You learned to read what you were looking at." Reed held her gaze. He knew she was lying, not about being a sniper, that part was clearly true, but about where the reading came from. That kind of red, that instant, surgical red of a man's fear, you didn't learn that in a classroom. You learned it in places that left marks. And her file was redacted. He decided right then that he was going to find out what those marks were. But not tonight. "All right," he said, raising his voice for the room. "Show's over. Everybody clear on the mission." "Clear," came the scattered response. "Carter, you're with us. You'll bunk in the annex tonight. Briefing's at 0500. Get some rest." He paused. "And nobody, and I mean nobody, gives her a hard time between now and then. She's on this team until I say she's not. That's the end of it. Understood." There were nods. There were also a few faces that clearly didn't agree, Briggs foremost among them. But nobody argued with Reed. Ava picked up her rifle case, slung it over her shoulder, and walked toward the door to the annex without another word. She didn't look at anybody. She didn't ask where anything was. She just moved quiet and economical, like somebody who had learned a long time ago that the less space you took up, the safer you were. The door shut behind her, and the moment it did, the room exploded. "Sarge, you cannot be serious," Briggs started. "She's 18, Reed," said another man. "That's a kid." "Redacted file, though," Kim said thoughtfully. "That means something. You don't redact nothing." "It means somebody upstairs owes somebody a favor," Briggs shot back. "It means her daddy's a general and she's on some checklist. That's what redacted means. It means she's connected, not qualified." "You saw her file," Reed said flatly. "Top of her class, Overwatch certified. She earned the qualification, whatever else is going on." "Anybody can pass a test in a controlled range," Briggs said. "That valley isn't a range. That valley is going to try to kill all of us, and I don't want a teenager who's never smelled cordite for real up on a ridge when it does. I don't care how she read me. Reading a guy in a warm room and holding a line when the rounds are cracking past your head are two completely different things, and everybody in here knows it." And the worst part was, he wasn't entirely wrong. Reed knew it. Every man in the room knew it. There was a difference between the range and the real thing, and it was a difference that got people killed and no file redacted, or not could tell you which side of that line a person would fall on until the moment came. "You're right," Reed said, and that surprised them. "You're right that we don't know how she'll hold up. We don't, but here's what I do know. I know HQ doesn't send us dead weight 2 days before Christmas into the worst storm of the year for no reason. Somebody made a decision to put her here. And until I understand why, I'm not going to throw away an Overwatch specialist because she's got a young face. We're threading a needle through a past that any idiot with a rifle could turn into a slaughterhouse. If there's a chance she's as good as her file says, I want her up high with a scope. That's not sentiment. That's math." The room quieted. "That said," Reed went on, "Briggs is right about one thing. We watch her close. First sign she can't handle it, she comes off the line, no argument, no shame. But we give her the chance to earn it. Same as every one of you got when you were the new guy nobody trusted." He looked around the table. "Or did you all forget what that felt like?" Nobody answered. But a few of them looked away because they hadn't forgotten. Every man in that room had been the one nobody wanted once. Every one of them had walked into a room full of people who'd already decided he'd fail. "Get some sleep," Reed said. "Oh, 500. The men filed out one by one. Briggs was the last to go, and he stopped at the door and looked back at Reed. "When this goes wrong," he said, "and it's going to go wrong, I want it on the record that I called it." "Noted," Reed said, and Briggs left. In the annex, Ava Carter sat alone on the edge of a cot, and for the first time all night, there was no one watching her. She let her shoulders drop, just a little, just for a moment. The calm she wore in front of the team wasn't a mask exactly. It was more like a wall, one she'd built brick by brick over years, and it took everything she had to keep it standing when a room full of men decided she was a joke. She'd known it would happen. She'd known before she ever got on the transport. 18 years old, small female walking into a SEAL team on Christmas Eve. Of course they'd laugh. Of course they'd mock her. She'd have been surprised if they hadn't. But knowing it was coming didn't make it not hurt. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and pulled out something she'd been carrying for 3 weeks. A letter. The paper was soft at the folds from being opened and closed so many times, and the handwriting on it was careful and looping and familiar, the handwriting of a woman who took her time with things. Ava unfolded it. She didn't need to. She had it memorized, every line of it, but she unfolded it anyway, the way you touch a bruise just to see if it still hurts. "Come home for Christmas," the letter said. "Whatever happened, whatever you think you did, it doesn't matter. You have a home. You have a mother who loves you. Please, baby, come home." Ava read it 3 times, and then she folded it back up slowly along the same soft creases, and she put it back in her pocket, and she stared at the wall. Home. There was no home. Not anymore. Not the way her mother meant it. Home was a place from before the thing that happened, before the reason her file was redacted, before she learned to read the fear in a man's face, because reading it was the only thing that had ever kept her alive. She couldn't go back there. Not to that house, not to that woman, not to the person she'd been when she still fit inside that life. That person was gone. She'd left her somewhere in the dark, in a place she never talked about, and no amount of Christmas lights was going to bring her back. So she didn't answer the letter. She didn't call. She took the assignment. Instead, she took the worst convoy of the year and the worst storm in 3 years with a team that didn't want her, because at least out here in the cold with a rifle in her hands, she knew who she was. Out here, she was useful. Out here, she could keep people alive. And maybe she thought, staring at that wall, maybe if she kept enough people alive, it would eventually add up to something. Maybe it would balance the scale. Maybe someday the weight in her chest would finally lift and she could go home and mean it. But not tonight. Tonight she had a mission. Ava lay back on the cot, still in her boots, still in her jacket, and she closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. Not really. She never really slept, not the way normal people did. She just went somewhere quiet behind her own eyes and waited for the light. A little after 4 in the morning, while the rest of the base was still dark, the annex door opened a crack. Reed stood there and he saw her already awake, already sitting up, rifle case beside her, ready. "Couldn't sleep either," he said. "I slept enough," she said. He came in and sat down on the cot across from her. For a while, neither of them said anything. Outside, the wind had died down a little, but the snow kept falling soft and endless. "That read you did on Briggs," Reed said finally. "You do that with everybody, or just guys who make it easy." A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched the corner of Ava's mouth. "Everybody," she said. "I can't turn it off. I stopped trying a long time ago." "What did you read on me?" Ava looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment, longer than was comfortable, and Reed found himself resisting the urge to look away, which was strange because Mason Reed didn't look away from anybody. "You already lost people," she said quietly. "More than one. You carry them. You count them every time you send men out, like you're keeping a ledger and you're terrified the number's going to go up tonight. And you looked at me and you saw a way to keep it from going up, so you're willing to bet on me even though every instinct you've got is screaming that I'm too young. That's not sentiment. You said it yourself. That's math." She paused. "But it's scared math, the best kind. The kind that keeps people alive." Reed was quiet for a long time. "You're not 18, he said it finally. "Not really, not in here." He tapped his own chest. "The paperwork says 18. But whatever put that look in your eyes, it happened a long time ago, and it made you a lot older than 18. Ava didn't answer. "You don't have to tell me what it was," Reed said. "Not tonight, maybe not ever. That's your business. But I need to know one thing before we roll out, and I need the truth. When it gets loud out there, when the rounds start cracking, and men start screaming, and everything goes to hell all at once, are you going to hold, or are you going to break? Because in a warm room, everybody's brave. I need to know about the cold." And for the first time all night, Ava Carter looked away from him. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses on her fingers, at the small white scars that crisscrossed her knuckles. Scars a girl her age had no business having. I've been in the cold, she said so quietly he almost didn't hear it. The loud kind, the kind you're talking about. She looked back up, and her eyes were steady again, but there was something raw in them now, something she couldn't quite tuck away this time. I didn't break Staff Sergeant. I held when I was a lot younger than 18, and I had a lot less reason to. Her jaw tightened. That's the problem. I held and people I loved didn't. And I've been living with that ever since. So don't worry about me breaking. I don't break. She stopped. I just don't have anything left to lose out there. That's what makes me good at this. And that's what should scare you about me if you were smart. The words hung in the air between them. Reed studied her, this girl who wasn't a girl, this 18-year-old, with the eyes of a woman who'd already buried the people she loved. And he understood in that moment exactly what HQ had sent him. Not a liability, not a favor for some general. They'd sent him someone who had walked through the worst thing a person can walk through and come out the other side hollowed out and hardened into something that didn't feel fear the way normal people did. They'd sent him a survivor. And survivors, in his experience, were the most dangerous people in the world to have on your side. Okay, Reed said. He stood up. Okay, Carter, you are up on the overwatch. I don't care what command says about the manifest. You ride in my vehicle, and when we hit that pass, you get up high, and you do exactly what you were sent here to do. Ava looked up at him, and there was something in her expression now that hadn't been there before. Surprise. And underneath it, something even more fragile. The faint disbelieving beginning of trust. Command denied my overwatch request, she said. I saw the order. They want me riding in the truck with the supplies. I know, Reed said. I read it too. You're overriding a command order. I'm making a field decision, Reed said, based on the best information available to me. And the best information available to me is that I've got a specialist who can read a man's fear across a room in 4 minutes, and I'd be a fool to leave her in the back of a truck. He picked up his own gear. Command can put it in my file. I've got plenty of room in there. Get your rifle. We roll in an hour. He walked to the door, and then he stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, he said, I don't know what happened to you, but whatever it was, you didn't do it. Whatever you're carrying, whatever put those scars on your hands and that look in your eyes, you didn't do it. And you don't have to keep paying for it forever. He paused. But that's a conversation for after we get everybody home. Understood. Ava didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed up in a way it hadn't in years, in a way she'd promised herself it never would again. Reed didn't wait for an answer. He just nodded once and he left. And Ava Carter sat alone in the annex in the cold with a letter from her mother in her pocket that she would never answer. And for the first time since she'd walked through that door and let a room full of men laugh in her face, the wall she'd built brick by brick cracked just slightly, just enough to let one single tear slide down her cheek before she wiped it away and stood up and reached for her rifle. Because she had a mission. And in a few hours, the men who'd mocked her, the men who'd called her a babysitting job and a Christmas mistake, the men who'd bet against her before she ever said a word, were going to drive straight into a valley that Ava Carter had already looked at on the map the night before, straight into a narrow choke point in the mountain pass, a place so perfect for an ambush that when she traced her finger across it, a cold certainty had settled in her chest. She hadn't said, anything about it in the briefing. Command hadn't asked her opinion, and she'd learned a long time ago that people didn't listen to 18-year-old girls until it was too late. But she'd seen it. She'd seen exactly where it was going to happen. And when it did, when that valley came alive with muzzle flashes and the men who'd laughed at her started screaming for help, Ava Carter was going to be up on that ridge, alone in the storm, with her oversized rifle and her steady hands and nothing left to lose. And she was going to hold the line. The hour passed the way hours always pass before something terrible, too slow and too fast at the same time. And when the vehicles rolled out through the gate at exactly 6 in the morning, the sky wasn't even light yet. Just a gray suggestion of it, low behind the mountains, and the snow still coming down like it had been coming down forever and intended to keep going. Ava Carter sat in the front vehicle beside Mason Reed, her rifle case across her knees, and she didn't say a word for the first 20 minutes. She didn't need to. She was watching. Everything. The road, the tree lines, the ridges, rising up on either side as they left the flat ground behind, and Reed noticed her eyes moving the whole time tracking. measuring, cataloging the way a person moves their eyes when they've learned that not looking gets you killed. "You always this quiet before a mission?" Reed asked. "I'm not being quiet," Ava said. "I'm working. Working. You see that ridge line coming up on the left, the one with the two rock outcroppings near the top?" Reed looked. "Yeah. If I wanted to hit this convoy, that's where I'd put a spotter. Not a shooter, a spotter. High enough to see the whole valley, low enough to get out fast if we started shooting back." She said it flatly, like she was reading a weather report. "There's nobody up there right now, but that's where I'd put him." Reed was quiet for a second. "You've been doing that the whole ride, haven't you? Picking out every spot somebody could hit us from." "Every one," Ava said. "It's the only thing I know how to do in a truck." In the vehicle behind them, Briggs was doing something entirely different. He was talking, loudly, to anybody who'd listen and to a few who wouldn't. "I'm just saying," Briggs was saying for the fourth time. "When it goes wrong, remember who called it. That's all I'm asking. A little recognition when the babysitting job gets us all killed." "Give it a rest, Briggs," Turner said from the driver's seat. "You've been on this for 12 hours. She read you like a magazine in front of the whole team. Just let it go, man. It's Christmas." "That's not reading, that's a party trick," Briggs shot back. "A carnival guesses your weight. Doesn't mean it can shoot straight. Doesn't mean it can hold a line. You watch. First time it gets loud, that kid's gonna curl up in a ball, and one of us is gonna have to peel her off the ground while we're getting shot at. That's the reality. That's what her party trick's worth when the cordite's in the air." David Kim, riding into the back, said quietly, "I don't know, Briggs. Redacted file, top of her class. That look she's got, I've seen that look before." Where Kim didn't answer right away. Then he said, "On guys who came back from places they don't talk about." That shut Briggs up, but only for a minute. At the 40-minute mark, the convoy reached the first real narrowing of the valley, where the road pinched down between two rising walls of stone, and Ava sat up straighter in her seat. "Slow down," she said. "We're on schedule," Reed said. "Slow down anyway." Her voice had changed. Not louder, tighter. "Something's wrong up ahead." Reed keyed his radio. "All vehicles reduce speed. Carter's got something." "Carter's got something," came Briggs's voice, dripping with sarcasm over the net. "Carter's got a bad feeling. Let's stop the whole convoy for the teenager's feelings." But Reed slowed. And 40 seconds later, the reason Ava had felt it became clear. Because there in the road ahead, half buried in the fresh snow, was a shape that didn't belong. A dead goat, just lying there in the middle of the pass where no goat had any business being. "So it's a dead goat," Briggs said. "Great, somebody's dinner froze. Can we keep moving?" "That goat's a marker," Ava said quietly, not to Briggs, to Reed. "Somebody put it there. You don't leave a kill in the open, animals get it. That goat's fresh and untouched, which means it's been placed there in the last hour, and it's placed at the exact center of the road at the exact point where the pass is narrowest." She turned and looked at Reed. "It's a range marker. Somebody set up a distance reference. They know somebody's coming through, and they've already measured the shot." The vehicle went silent. "You're sure?" Reed said. "No," Ava said. "I'm never sure, but I'd bet my life on it. And more importantly, I'd bet yours." She paused. "Which is why I'm telling you now, and not after." Reed didn't hesitate. He keyed the radio. "All vehicles hold. Nobody advances past the marker. Repeat, hold position." "You're calling a full stop over a dead goat," Briggs said, and now there was real disgust in his voice. "Sarge, come on. She's spooked. She's a kid on her first real mission, and she's seeing ghosts, and you're letting her run the whole convoy. This is exactly what I warned you about." And this was the first crack, the first real fracture, because a couple of the other men were quietly starting to agree with Briggs now. A dead goat was a thin thing to stop a convoy for. If she was wrong, they were burning daylight and fuel and putting themselves behind schedule in a storm, all on the say-so of an 18-year-old with a bad feeling. Reed felt the weight of it. He felt the team's doubt pressing on him. And he made a decision that surprised everybody, including himself. "Kim," he said, "take the drone up, thermal. Sweep the ridges on both sides 500-meter arc. If it's clear, we roll, and I owe Carter an apology and Briggs a beer. If it's not, we do this her way." He looked at Ava. "That fair?" "That's fair," Ava said. Kim got the drone up. It rose into the falling snow, a small dark shape climbing into the gray, and its camera fed back to the tablet in his lap. And for about 90 seconds, there was nothing. Just cold rock and cold snow and empty ridges. And Briggs started to grin, and he opened his mouth to say something, and then Kim went completely still. Sarge, Kim said. His voice had dropped. Sarge, you need to see this. What? Thermal contacts. Ridgeline north wall. I count. He stopped. He counted again. I count 9. No 12. 12 heat signatures spread across the high ground in defilade. They're dug in. They've been up there long enough to go cold under cover. That's why they didn't pop right away. He looked up and his face was white. They're waiting for us. She was right. She was dead right. 12 of them, and we drove straight to the edge of it. Nobody said anything. And then very quietly over the radio, Briggs said, Okay, that's 12. Ava didn't gloat. She didn't even react. She just reached down, unlatched her rifle case, and started assembling her weapon with quick practiced hands, and she said in that same flat, calm voice, There's more than 12. Thermal only sees what's not under cover. There's a shooter behind those 2 outcroppings on the south wall that your drone can't see because they're in hard cover with overhead concealment. And there's an IED somewhere between here and that goat because you don't set up an ambush this good without a way to stop the lead vehicle. She locked the bolt. So here's what's about to happen. If we sit here, they'll wait us out or bring up more. If we roll forward, we hit the IED. If we back up, they'll fire on us in the open. There's no clean way out of this. There's only the least bad one. Which is, Reed asked. Ava looked at him. You put me up high, right now, before they realize we've spotted them. I get eyes on that whole valley from a position they don't know I'm in, and I even the numbers before they know the game changed. She paused. But it has to be now. The second they see this drone still up, they'll know we know, and they'll open up. We've got maybe 2 minutes. Reed stared at her. And in that moment, he understood that the entire mission, every life in that convoy was hanging on whether he trusted an 18-year-old girl he'd known for 12 hours over his own instincts and the loud, insistent doubt of half his team. He made the call. Go, he said. Kim, bring the drone in low and slow. Keep it acting dumb so they don't spook. Turner, you get Carter to that south outcropping, the high one, and you do it in the next 90 seconds. Everybody else hold and look relaxed. We are 3 vehicles that stopped for a dead goat. That's all we are until Carter's in position. Move. At the 1 hour and 4 minute mark, Ava Carter went up the south wall of the pass, and the way she moved changed everything for the men watching her. Because she didn't climb like a trainee. She climbed like a shadow, low fast, using every fold in the ground, never once silhouetting herself against the sky. And Turner, who was supposed to be escorting her, found himself falling behind. Found himself watching an 18-year-old move through hostile terrain with more skill than he had, and he heard himself mutter, where the hell did she learn to do that? Ava reached the outcropping. She went prone. She settled behind her rifle, and she keyed her radio once and said 2 words, in position. And then she stopped talking, and she started watching, and what she saw through her scope confirmed everything. Reed, she said quietly, confirming 12 on the north wall, plus 1 shooter south, plus a 2-man RPG team. I didn't see low near the base of the north outcropping. That's 15, and the IED's in the goat. It's in the goat, Reed. That's why it's untouched. It's not a range marker, it's the trigger. Somebody's got a command wire or a remote, and the second your lead vehicle rolls up to check it, they blow it and open up from all sides. Her voice never changed. You were 40 seconds from driving into that. In the vehicle, Reed felt his blood go cold. Because she was right. Standard procedure would have been to send a man forward to check the obstruction. He'd have sent Kim or Turner or gone himself. And the moment they got close, the whole world would have come apart. An 18-year-old girl had just saved his entire team, and they hadn't even fired a shot yet. Briggs, Reed said over the net very quietly, you still there? A pause. Yeah, Sarge. You still want that apology on the record? A longer pause, and then Briggs, in a voice completely stripped of its earlier swagger, said, No, Sarge, I don't. I want you to tell that kid I'm sorry, and I want you to tell her I'm real glad she's up on that ridge. But there was no time for apologies because at the 1 hour and 11 minute mark, the enemy made their move, and everything Ava had predicted began to come true. It started with the drone. Kim had brought it in low and slow, exactly as ordered. But somebody on that north ridge was patient and sharp and had been watching it, and they finally decided it had seen too much. A single shot cracked out from the high ground, and the drone came apart in the air and dropped out of the sky in pieces. They know, Kim said. Anda, Sarge, they know we made them. Everybody down, Reed roared. Contact north, contact north. And then the valley came alive. It came alive the way Ava had known it would, all at once from every direction. Muzzle flashes stitching across both ridge lines, rounds cracking off the vehicles. The flat wall of noise that Reed had asked her about the night before the loud, he'd wanted to know if she could survive. Men were shouting. Somebody was already screaming. The lead vehicle's windshield spiderwebbed and blew inward. And Ava Carter up on the south wall did not curl into a ball. She did not freeze. She did not break. She went to work. At the 1 hour and 12-minute mark, 1 minute into the ambush, Ava fired her first shot, and a man on the north ridge who'd been about to fire an RPG into the middle of the stopped convoy simply stopped existing. She didn't announce it. She just shifted her aim and found the second man on the RPG team, the loader, and fired again, and there was no more RPG team. RPG team down, she said over the net, calm as anything. Reed, get your people out of the vehicles and behind them, engine block side. The north wall shooters are going to walk fire down the road. Move them now. You heard her, out of the vehicles, Reed shouted. Cover behind the engine blocks. Go, go, go. The men bailed out into the snow, rounds cracking around them, and got low behind the heavy engine blocks of the vehicles, and it saved their lives because a heartbeat later, the north wall opened up full and raked the road exactly where they'd been. Down behind his vehicle, Briggs was breathing hard, back against the tire rifle in his hands, and he was hearing something he couldn't quite process. Because up on that ridge, the thing that was supposed to be a scared teenager was calling out targets in a voice steadier than his own. Shooter north wall, second outcropping. He's yours if you can see him. Otherwise, give me the angle, Ava was saying. Reed, you've got two of them trying to flank right. They're going to come down that draw and hit your rear vehicle. Somebody watch the draw. I've got the draw, Kim called. I've got it. I see them. Don't take the shot yet, Ava said. Let them commit. If you fire now, they'll just pull back and try somewhere else. Wait until they're in the open in the draw with no cover, then you take both. You can do this, Kim. Wait for it. Wait. Wait. A beat. Now. Kim fired twice, and the two flankers dropped in the draw, and Kim stared at his own rifle in disbelief, because he'd made a shot he wasn't sure he could make because a voice in his ear had told him he could and had told him exactly when. At the 1 hour and 14-minute mark, 2 minutes in, the enemy realized something was wrong. They'd planned this ambush perfectly. 15 men high ground on both walls and IED to stop the lead vehicle flankers to close the trap. It should have been over in 90 seconds. A slaughter. But 2 minutes in, their RPG team was gone, their flankers were gone, and men on the ridge lines were dropping one at a time to a rifle they couldn't locate from an angle they couldn't source. And no one down in that convoy seemed to be panicking the way trapped men were supposed to panic. Because up on the south wall, a ghost was hunting them. They're getting nervous, Ava reported. The fire's getting sloppy. They expected us dead by now. Reed, this is the window. When men get scared, they bunch up, and I've got two of them who just moved together behind the same rock on the north wall, and rocks don't stop what I'm shooting. 2 shots close together. They don't anymore. Reed, crouched behind his engine block, was watching the ridge through his own optic, and he could see it happening, could see the enemy fire faltering, could see men on the high ground starting to look over their shoulders, and he understood that the entire momentum of this fight had shifted, and it had shifted because of one person. How many she got now? Turner shouted from behind the next vehicle. Reed did the count in his head. RPG Team 2, Flankers 2, the 2 behind the rock. 6, he shouted back. She's got 6 in 2 minutes, alone. 6, Turner repeated, and then he laughed a wild, disbelieving laugh in the middle of a firefight. 6 in 2 minutes, the babysitting job's got 6. But then at the 1 hour and 16-minute mark, everything nearly came apart because the enemy had a card of their own to play, and they played it. A machine gun opened up from a position none of them had made. Not the thermal, not the drone, not even Ava. It had been held in reserve, silent, waiting for exactly this moment, and it opened up from a spur of rock high on the north wall, and it walked a stream of heavy fire straight down the length of the convoy, and this time the engine blocks weren't enough because the gun was high enough to shoot down over them. "Gun, heavy gun, north spur," somebody screamed. And Jake Turner, who'd been laughing a second before, made a mistake. He moved. He tried to shift to better cover, and for one instant he was in the open, and the machine gun found him, walked toward him, and a man rose up from behind cover 20 meters away that nobody had seen an enemy fighter who'd worked down close during the chaos. And he raised his rifle and put it against the side of Turner's head at point-blank range, close enough that missing was impossible. Close enough that Turner's whole life came down to the half second it takes to pull a trigger. Turner saw it. He saw the man. He saw the muzzle. He knew in that frozen instant that he was dead. And then the man's head snapped sideways and he dropped. And the shot that killed him arrived a full beat after he was already falling, because it had come from 600 meters away from the south wall, from an 18-year-old girl who caught the movement in the very corner of her scope and swung her rifle and fired in less time than it takes to think about firing. Turner fell backward into the snow, alive, shaking his hand pressed to the side of his own head where the enemy muzzle had been a half second before. And over the radio he heard Ava Carter's voice, and for the first time it wasn't perfectly flat. There was something in it, something that might have been fear finally, but fear for him, not for herself. "Turner? Turner, talk to me. Are you hit?" Turner's voice cracked. I'm not hit. I'm not hit. He was right there. He was right there, Carter. He was gonna..." "How did you get behind the engine block and stay there?" Ava said, and the flatness came back into her voice like a door closing. "You're welcome. Now let me work." At the 1 hour and 18-minute mark, 4 minutes in the machine gun was still the problem, and everybody knew it. It had them pinned. As long as it fired, nobody could move, nobody could maneuver, and eventually it would chew through the vehicles, and then it would chew through them. "Carter, can you get the gun?" Reed said. "Negative," Ava said. "It's in hard cover overhead concealment. I can see the flash, but not the gunner. I can't kill what I can't see." A pause. "But I can make him move. Reed, I need you to do something, and you're not going to like it. Tell me. I need a target. I need somebody to draw his fire for exactly 3 seconds so he leans out of his cover to track them, and when he leans out, I own him. 3 seconds in the open. That's what it costs to kill that gun." The radio went silent because everybody understood what she was asking. Somebody had to run into the open, into the teeth of a heavy machine gun, and stay there for 3 full seconds and trust that a girl 600 meters away could kill the gunner before the gunner killed them. "I'll do it," Reed said immediately. "No," Ava said. "Not you. You're the leader. They lose you. They lose cohesion. It has to be somebody fast and somebody who trusts me completely, because if they hesitate, if they dive for cover half a second early, the gunner doesn't lean out far enough, and I don't get the shot, and they die for nothing." And there was a silence, and into that silence, a voice that nobody expected. "I'll do it," Briggs said. Everybody froze. "Briggs," Reed started. "I'll do it," Briggs said again, and his voice was steady now, steadier than it had been in the 12 hours. "She wants somebody who trusts her completely. 12 hours ago, I called her a liability. I said she'd get us killed. And she's up on that ridge with 6 confirmed, and she just saved Turner's life with a shot I couldn't make on my best day. He was already tightening his gear, already coiling to move. So yeah, I trust her. Let me be the one who runs. Let me be the one who bets his life on it. I owe her that, and I owe myself the chance to be wrong out loud, the same way I was wrong out loud last night." "Briggs," Ava said over the net, and there was something in her voice. "Look at me before you run. Find my position, the high outcropping south wall. Find it. You see it? I see it. When you run, don't watch the gun. Watch me. I'll fire the second he leans out, and the instant you see my muzzle flash, you dive, not before. You watch my flash, you live. You watch the gun, you die. Do you understand me?" "I understand you," Briggs said. "Then go on my mark," Ava said. "And Briggs, I've got you. I promise you. I've got you." A beat. "Mark!" And Briggs ran. He ran out into the open, into the storm, into the sightline of a heavy machine gun, and the gunner saw him, and the gun swung toward him, and the whole world narrowed down to a man sprinting through the snow, and a girl 600 meters away with her finger on a trigger, and her breath held, and her heart, for the first time in years, absolutely still. The gunner leaned out to track the running man. He leaned out 1 inch too far, and Ava Carter fired. At the 1 hour and 19-minute mark, the heavy machine gun went silent, and Briggs was still alive, diving into the snow behind the rear vehicle exactly when he saw her muzzle flash, and not 1 instant before. And for a second, there was almost quiet, the kind of ringing near quiet that comes when the loudest thing in the world stops. "Guns down," Ava said. "Guns down. Briggs, you good." Briggs lay in the snow, chest heaving, staring up at the falling snow, alive, impossibly alive. And he started to laugh, not a mocking laugh this time, a broken, grateful, disbelieving laugh, the laugh of a man who ran into a machine gun and lived because an 18-year-old told him to watch her muzzle flash. "I'm good," he said. "Carter, I'm good. You actually," he couldn't finish it. "You said you had me, and you had me." "I said I had you," Ava said quietly. "I don't say things I don't mean." But the fight wasn't over. At the 1 hour and 22-minute mark, with the gun down and their numbers cut in half, the surviving enemy fighters did the most dangerous thing they could do, which was stop trying to win and start trying to kill as many Americans as possible before they died, and they threw themselves down off the ridges in a final desperate assault, screaming, firing on the run, closing the distance to make Ava's long gun useless and turn it into a close fight where numbers mattered again. "They're coming down," Kim shouted. "They're coming off the walls. They're rushing us." "That's good," Ava said, and her calm was almost frightening now. "That means they know they've lost the range fight. That means they're desperate. Reed, hold your fire until they clear the rocks, and then everybody fires at once, one volley on my count, because a coordinated volley into masked men in the open breaks them, and a bunch of scattered shots doesn't. Hold. Hold. They have to leave cover to reach you, and the second they do, they're mine and yours together." A beat. 3, 2, 1, fire. And the convoy fired as one. Every man at once, a single crashing volley into the fighters, caught in the open, coming down off the walls. And Ava's rifle sang above all of it, one steady shot after another, and the assault that was supposed to overrun them collapsed in the snow less than halfway down the slope. And then, at the 1 hour and 24-minute mark, 6 minutes after the first shot, it was over. Not paused. Over. The valley went quiet, a real quiet this time, the snow still falling like nothing had happened, and the men of SEAL Team 7 crouched behind their vehicles and slowly began to understand that they were alive. All of them, every single one. 15 enemy fighters had set the perfect ambush. Not one American was dead. Reed keyed his radio, and his voice when it came was rough. "Carter, status." "In position," Ava said. "Watching. There may be stragglers. I'm going to hold up here and cover you while you check the road and clear that IED. Nobody touches the goat. There's a remote detonator on it, and whoever had the trigger is either dead or running, but I'm not betting your legs on it. EOD protocol, treat it live." A pause. "And somebody should check the wounded. Kim, I saw you get clipped in the arm about 4 minutes ago. Don't tell me you didn't. I watched it happen through my scope. Get that looked at." Kim looked down at his own arm, at the tear in his sleeve, and the blood he'd been ignoring and the adrenaline, and he laughed. "She saw me get hit from 600 meters in a firefight while she was killing everybody." Down behind the vehicles, the men of SEAL Team 7 looked up at the south wall, at the small outcropping, high on the rock, where an 18-year-old girl lay prone behind a rifle nearly as long as she was tall, and something passed through all of them at once, something none of them would have admitted to 12 hours earlier. It wasn't just respect. Respect was too small a word for it. It was the specific, bone-deep feeling of men who have just been kept alive by someone they'd written off, and who understand all at once and all the way down exactly how badly they'd misjudged her, and exactly how close their arrogance had come to killing them all. Briggs was the first one to say it out loud. He got to his feet slowly, and he looked up at that ridge, and he cupped his hands around his mouth, and he shouted loud enough to echo off both walls of the pass. "Carter." Her voice came back over the radio dry. "You don't have to yell, Briggs, I can hear you fine. And also I can read lips at this range, so watch it." A ripple of laughter went through the exhausted men. "I called you a babysitting job," Briggs shouted anyway, ignoring the radio, needing to say it out loud, needing the whole team to hear him say it. "I called you a Christmas mistake. I said you'd get us killed. I said it to your face, and I said it behind your back, and I said it on the radio, and I want every man here to hear me say this." He took a breath. "I have never been so wrong about anybody in my whole life. You didn't get us killed. You kept us alive. Every one of us. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, kid. From the bottom of whatever I've got left after today." There was a long pause, and then Ava's voice came back, and it was quieter than before, and something in it had shifted, something that the men couldn't have named, but that Reed, listening, recognized because he'd heard the edge of it the night before in the annex. "You don't owe me an apology, Briggs," she said. "You were scared. Scared people make noise. I told you that the first night. I wasn't insulting you. I was reading you." A pause. "And for the record, you just ran into a machine gun on the word of a girl you'd known for 12 hours. That's not the guy who mocked me last night. That's somebody I'd go through a door with. So we're square. We were always going to be square. It just took a firefight for you to catch up." Briggs stood there in the snow, and he wiped his face with the back of his glove, and if anybody asked, it was the cold making his eyes water. Reed, meanwhile, was already moving through the aftermath, checking his men, checking the wounded, and there was only one Kim's arm, a graze, nothing that wouldn't heal. And as he moved among them, he kept coming back to the same impossible fact. 15 fighters, a perfect ambush. 0 friendly killed. He'd been running teams for 11 years. He kept a ledger in his head. Ava had read that. A ledger of every man he'd ever wowed, and today, against every probability, against a trap that should have ended his entire team, the number hadn't gone up. Because of her. He climbed the south wall himself to her position, and when he reached the top, she was still prone behind her rifle, still watching the valley, still working even now, and he crouched down beside her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "You held," Reed said finally. "I told you I would. You did more than hold." He looked out over the valley at the 15 men who would never go home, and then back at her. "You saw the goat. You saw the RPG team the drone missed. You called the flankers before they moved. You killed the gun with a bait-and shot that shouldn't have worked, and you saved Turner's life with a shot no one else on this team could make." He shook his head slowly. "Last night you told me you didn't have anything left to lose, that it's what makes you good at this." He paused. "I watched you today. That's not somebody with nothing to lose. Somebody with nothing to lose gets sloppy, gets reckless, doesn't care. You cared. You cared about every single man down there. You've got plenty to lose, Carter. You just tell yourself you don't because it's easier than the alternative." Ava didn't answer for a long moment. She kept her eye to the scope. "You read people too, Staff Sergeant," she said finally, and her voice was very quiet. "You just don't know you're doing it." "What happened to you?" Reed asked. Gently, not pushing, just asking. "You made a shot today that a person doesn't make in a classroom. That was combat, real combat in your muscle memory, deeper than training goes. You've done this before, you've done this a lot, and you're 18. He let it sit. "Who taught you? Well, where were you? What happened, Ava?" And for a second, just a second, the wall cracked and Reed saw it happen, saw something behind her eyes come loose, and saw the girl underneath the ghost. And she opened her mouth, and he thought she might actually tell him. But then her whole body went rigid, and her eyes snapped back to the scope, and her voice changed completely. "Movement," she said. "North wall, 200 meters up in the rocks. Somebody survived, and they're not running." A pause, and her breath went slow and steady and terrible. "They've got something on their back. Reed, get down. Get your men down and behind the vehicles right now, because whoever that is didn't come here to shoot us." "Carter, what are you seeing?" "He's got a vest," Ava said, absolutely calm, absolutely certain, her finger already moving to the trigger. "He's a walker. He's coming down for the vehicles to take as many of you with him as he can, and he's already inside my minimum comfortable range. And if I miss this shot, or if I hit the vest wrong, everybody down there dies." Her breath stopped. "So I'm not going to miss." And she settled behind her rifle, 600 meters, and closing from a man who'd come to kill them all, with the entire surviving team's lives resting once again on a single shot from an 18-year-old girl who told everyone she had nothing left to lose, and who was in that frozen instant, proving with every fiber of her being that it was the biggest lie she'd ever told. The shot broke the silence like the world cracking in half, and 200 meters up the north wall, the man with the vest folded and dropped, and he did not detonate because Ava Carter had put a round exactly where a round needed to go through the shoulder blade, and the spine severing every nerve that would have let a thumb close on a trigger before the message could travel, and the vest went with him into the rocks, silent and harmless. A bomb attached to a body that could no longer command it to go off. For a full 3 seconds, nobody down in that convoy breathed. Then Reed let out the breath he'd been holding, and he keyed his radio, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Carter, is it down? Is it really down?" "It's down," Ava said. "The vest is intact, but the man's gone and he can't trigger it. Don't anybody go near it. EOD, only when they get here. If there was a dead man's switch in his hand, we'd already know, so there wasn't." A pause. "Reed, that's the last of them. I've been watching the whole valley for 90 seconds, and there's no more movement. It's over. For real this time." But Reed had been doing this long enough to know that a battlefield tells you it's over about 3 times before it actually means it. So at the 1 hour and 28-minute mark, he did not stand up and celebrate. He got his men into a clearing posture, spread them out, put eyes on every angle, and only then did he let himself begin to believe that his entire team was going to walk out of that valley alive. 15 enemy fighters. A perfect, patient, professionally constructed ambush. And a suicide walker as the final insurance policy. 0 Americans dead. He climbed the rest of the way to Ava's position, and this time when he reached her, she'd rolled onto her back and was lying in the snow beside her, rifle staring up at the falling sky, and her chest was rising and falling fast, and Reed realized with a jolt that it was the first time all day he'd seen her look tired. Not weak, not shaken, just for one honest moment human. "You okay?" he said, crouching beside her. "I'm fine," Ava said, which was what people said when they weren't, and Reed had learned that a long time ago too. "That last shot," he said, "the walker. You were talking about your minimum comfortable range, and then he came inside it and you took a shot with the whole team's lives on it, on a moving man with a bomb on his back in a snowstorm at range." He shook his head slowly. "Carter, a shot like that isn't skill. Skill gets you to the trigger. What pulls the trigger clean on a shot like that, with everything riding on it, that's not skill. That's something else. That's something that got burned into you," and he paused. "You were going to tell me, before you saw him, you were about to tell me what happened to you. I saw it." Ava closed her eyes, and for a long moment with the snow landing on her face and melting there, she said nothing at all. "Not here," she said finally. "Not with the body still warm. There's a right place to say it, and this isn't it." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "But I will tell you, I owe you that. You put me up on this ridge when command said to leave me in a truck. You bet your career and your team on a girl you'd known for 12 hours. You earned the truth." She swallowed. "Just not here." "Okay," Reed said. "Okay, not here." He offered her his hand and she took it, and he pulled her to her feet, and for just a second holding the hand of this 18-year-old who had just killed more men in 6 minutes than most operators kill in a career. Mason Reed felt the strangest and most protective thing he'd felt in years, a feeling he didn't have a name for, somewhere between what he felt for the men under his command and what he imagined a father might feel. And he let go of her hand quickly, because he didn't know what to do with it. At the 1 hour and 34-minute mark, they came down off the ridge together, and the reception waiting for Ava at the bottom was not the one she'd walked into the night before. The men of SEAL Team 7 were not laughing now. They were standing. They were standing in a loose half circle at the base of the wall, waiting for her, all of them, even Kim with his arm freshly wrapped, even Turner, who still had a hand-shaped memory on the side of his head, where an enemy muzzle had pressed a half second before he should have died. And when Ava came down the last of the rocks and stepped onto the road, not one of them said a word. And then quietly, without anybody organizing it, without anybody giving an order, they started to clap. It wasn't a wild thing. It wasn't cheering. It was low and steady and serious, the applause of men who don't clap easily, who'd been humbled all the way down to the ground and were saying the only thing they knew how to say to the person who'd humbled them, which was thank you and I'm sorry, and I see you now all at once, without any of them having to open their mouths. Ava stopped. She stood at the bottom of the wall, small in her gear snow on her shoulders, and she looked at the men clapping for her. And for one terrible second, she didn't know what to do with her face, because nobody had clapped for Ava Carter in a very long time. And the last time somebody had it had been in a different life before everything. and the memory of it hit her sideways and stole the breath right out of her chest. She got it back. She always got it back. But it took her a second. "Knock it off," she said, but there was no edge in it, and everybody heard that there was no edge in it. "We've still got a Lissy aid in a goat, in a team of medics, an EOD inbound, and we're standing in the open in a valley that just tried to kill us. Save the party for the base." But nobody knocked it off, not right away. And Briggs stepped forward out of the half circle, and he stopped in front of her, and this man who 12 hours ago had laughed in her face and called her a Christmas mistake, now stood in front of her, not knowing what to do with his own hands. "I already said I was sorry," he said, on the radio. "I said it so everybody could hear. But I wanted to say it to your face, too. Because I said the ugly thing to your face last night, and a man who says the ugly thing to your face has to say the sorry to your face, too, or it doesn't count." He stuck out his hand. "Briggs, Danny Briggs, and I'd be dead into the snow right now with my head opened up if it wasn't for you, and so would Turner. And so would half these guys. And I'm going to spend the rest of this deployment making sure every single one of them remembers it." Ava looked at his hand, and then she took it. "Ava Carter," she said. "And you don't have to make anybody remember anything. That's not why I did it." "I know it's not," Briggs said. "That's exactly why I'm going to do it." At the 1 hour and 41-minute mark, the reaction force and the medics in the EOD team arrived, roaring up the pass in a column of vehicles. In the quiet after the battle intimacy of the moment, shattered into the organized chaos of a secured site. And Ava Carter stepped back from all of it, the way she always stepped back to the edge, to the outside, to the place where she could watch. But something was different now, and she felt it, and it unsettled her more than the firefight had. Because as the medics moved through and the EOD team went to work on the goat, and the reaction force set up a perimeter, the men of SEAL Team 7 kept looking for her. Not to check on her like an outsider. Not to babysit the babysitter. They kept looking for her the way a team looks for one of its own, checking. She was still there, still inside the circle, still accounted for, and every time one of them found her with his eyes and gave her a small nod before going back to work. Ava felt the wall she'd built her whole life get a little harder to hold up. She didn't know how to be inside the circle. She'd forgotten how. Maybe she'd never really known. Lieutenant Marcus Hale found her standing at the edge of the site, and he was the one man on the team who hadn't clapped, not because he wasn't grateful, but because he was an officer, and officers process things differently, and he'd spent the last 20 minutes on the radio to command trying to explain what had happened in a way that wouldn't sound insane. "Carter," he said, "Sir, I owe you the biggest apology on this team. And I'm the one man who didn't say it out loud yet, so let me fix that." Hale was a careful man, and he chose his words like they cost money. "When your file came through, I read the redactions, and I made an assumption. I assumed somebody was hiding an embarrassment. A screw-up. Nobody wanted attached to their name dumped on us for Christmas, so it wouldn't be their problem." He paused. "I was wrong about what they were hiding. They weren't hiding an embarrassment. They were hiding you. Whatever you are, whatever you've done, somebody upstairs decided the world wasn't allowed to know about it. And now I understand why, because if the world knew what I just watched an 18-year-old do in that valley, they'd have a lot of questions nobody wants to answer." He held her eyes. "I'm not going to ask those questions, but I want you to know that I know there are questions. And I want you to know that whatever the answers are, you have a place on this team for as long as you want one. That's not a thank you. That's a fact." Ava was quiet for a moment. "Sir," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When you called this in just now, the result, 0 friendly killed, 15 hostile down, ambush broken." She watched his face. "What did command say?" And something flickered across Hale's face, something he tried to hide and couldn't quite, and Ava saw it because Ava saw everything, and a small, cold weight settled into her stomach. "They asked for details," Hale said carefully. "They asked about me," Ava said. "It wasn't a question." Hale hesitated. "They asked who broke the ambush. I told them the truth. I told them it was the overwatch specialist." He paused, and there was a silence on the other end, a long one. "And then they told me to have you ready for a debrief the moment we get back to base priority ahead of everyone else on the team." His jaw tightened. "Carter, I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what a normal debrief sounds like, and that wasn't it. Somebody up the chain heard your result and reacted to it. Reacted personally. Like they knew your name before I said it. The cold weight in Ava's stomach got heavier. Yeah, she said quietly. That sounds about right. You want to tell me what that's about? No, sir, Ava said. But I'll tell you this much because you've earned it and because you're going to find out anyway. That reaction you heard on the radio that silenced that priority debrief. That's not about today. Today's just what made them remember I exist. She looked out at the valley at the men working at the bodies being cataloged in the snow. There are people up that chain who were hoping I'd stay a footnote, a redacted line in a file that nobody ever had a reason to open. And today I put 15 bodies in a valley and saved a SEAL team on Christmas Eve, and now somebody's going to open the file. Her voice was very flat, and when they do, it's going to be a problem. For them, and maybe for me. Hale stared at her. What did you do, Carter? And there it was, the question, the real one. The one Reed had asked on the ridge, and she deferred the one Hale was asking now, the one that had been hanging over her since the second she walked through that door and let a room full of men laugh at a girl whose file was redacted. Ava looked at the lieutenant for a long moment. I survived something I wasn't supposed to survive, she said finally, and I told the truth about it afterward when everybody wanted me to lie. That's the whole crime, sir. I lived, and then I told the truth. She turned to go. You'll understand when you understand. For now, I've got a rifle to clean and a debrief to dread. Excuse me. And she walked away, leaving Lieutenant Marcus Hale standing at the edge of a secured battlefield with more questions than he'd had before he opened his mouth, which was he was starting to realize the standard experience of talking to Ava Carter. At the 2-hour and 6-minute mark, the convoy finally completed its actual mission because the fight had been the obstacle, not the objective, and the objective was still sitting in the back of the vehicle's supplies for a forward outpost full of men who were also spending Christmas Eve freezing in the mountains, waiting on a delivery that had almost died in a valley. They pushed through the pass, past the cleared IED, past the place where 15 men had waited in the cold to kill them, and they made the delivery. And the men at the forward outpost who had heard the fight over the radio net without being able to do anything about it came out into the snow to meet the convoy that everyone had assumed was lost. We heard it, said the outpost sergeant, a grizzled older man named Doyle, gripping Reed's forearm. We heard the whole thing on the net. 15 hostiles, full ambush, and then it just stopped. Whole valley just went quiet. We figured you were gone. We were already writing the message home in our heads. His eyes were wet, and he didn't care. What happened out there, Reed? Who broke it? 15 men in a set ambush that doesn't just break. Somebody broke it. Who? Reed looked over at Ava, who was as always standing at the edge of things, cleaning her rifle, not participating in the reunion, and he made a decision. He said loud enough for everyone to hear. Carter, overwatch specialist. She saw the ambush before we drove into it. She called every enemy position. She killed the RPG team and the flankers and the machine gun and a suicide walker, and she did it alone from a ridge in the storm. He paused. She's 18 years old, and she saved every man in this convoy. And if anybody at this outpost has a problem with a teenage girl out shooting every operator here, they can take it up with me. Because I watched it happen, and I'm never going to hear a word against her as long as I live. Doyle looked at Ava. He looked at her small frame and her young face and her steady hands moving over her rifle. And he'd been in this long enough to know that the world was full of things that didn't make sense, and he'd learned to just accept the ones that kept you alive. Ma'am, he said, and he saluted her. He saluted her, a grizzled sergeant twice her age who outranked her, who had no reason to salute an 18-year-old attachment, saluted Ava Carter in the snow at a forward outpost on Christmas Eve, and Ava froze with her rifle half cleaned in her hands, and she didn't know what to do, because you don't salute back when you're being honored. Like that, you just receive it. And receiving things was the one thing Ava Carter had never in her life learned how to do. You don't have to do that, she said quietly. I know I don't, Doyle said. That's why I'm doing it. And Ava thought distantly that she'd heard almost those exact words twice today, first from Briggs, and now from this old sergeant, that same phrase, I know I don't have to. That's why I'm doing it. And she understood for the first time that this was what it sounded like when people chose to honor you instead of being obligated to, and that it was somehow so much heavier than obligation, and she had absolutely no idea how to carry it. At the 2-hour and 19-minute mark, with the delivery made and the site secured, and the reaction force taking over the cleanup SEAL team. Seven turned around and began the long, cold drive back to base, and in the front vehicle in the quiet, with the adrenaline finally draining out of everyone, and leaving that hollow, shaky exhaustion that comes after Turner turned around in the driver's seat at a stop and looked back at Ava, who was riding in the rear now. And he said the thing he'd been trying to figure out how to say for 2 hours. "He had the muzzle against my head," Turner said. "The guy, he was right there, Carter. It was over. I felt it. There's a thing that happens when you know you're dead, and it happened. His voice caught. My whole life did the thing. It flashed. My wife, my kid's 4, Carter. She's 4 years old, and she's waiting for me to come home. And I was about to not come home, and I knew it, and then he couldn't finish it. He tried twice. How did you even see him? You were 600 meters away, looking at the north wall, and he was down low, close in the chaos. How did you see him?" Ava was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't looking at the north wall," she said. "I was looking at you." Turner went still. "After the gun opened up and you all bailed out, I did a count," Ava said. "I count heads, constantly. It's a thing I do. I'd counted everybody into cover except you, because you were the one who moved wrong. And when somebody moves wrong, I keep a scope on them, because people who move wrong are the ones who die. So I was already on you when he stood up. I saw him before you did. I saw him the second his shoulders came up out of the rocks." She paused. "I fired before I finished thinking about it. If I'd thought about it, you'd be dead. That's the whole answer. I don't think. Thinking is too slow. I just watch the man who's about to tien and I move faster than the person trying to kill him." Turner stared at her. "You were watching me because you thought I was going to die," he said slowly. "I was watching you because you were the most likely one to die," Ava corrected. "And I keep a scope on the most likely one to die. Always. Whichever one it is at any given second. It changes. During the fight, it was you. Then it was Briggs when he ran at the gun. Then it was all of you when they rushed. Then it was everybody again when the walker came down. The most likely one to die is a moving target. My whole job is to always know who it is and to already be aiming at whatever's about to kill them." Nobody said anything for a moment. "That's," Kim said finally from the passenger seat, his wounded arm cradled in his lap. "Carter, that's the most exhausting way to fight I've ever heard. You're not shooting the enemy. You're guarding each of us one at a time faster than they can pick us off. That's how do you even hold that in your head? 12, 15 threats in 8 of us, and you're tracking which one of us is closest to dead at every single second and pre-aiming at his killer." "Practice," Ava said quietly. "Practice where?" Turner asked. "Carter, we've been trying to figure you out all day. You're 18. Where does an 18-year-old practice guarding a whole team one man at a time through a firefight? That's not a range skill. That's not even a normal combat skill. That's something you only get by doing it over and over while people you care about die when you're too slow." He said it gently, but he said it because he'd earned the right because she'd saved his life. Somebody died, didn't they? Somebody you were supposed to be watching. And you were too slow once a long time ago. And you've spent every day since making sure you're never too slow again. And the vehicle went completely silent because Turner had said, the thing, the true thing, the thing under all of it, and he hadn't even meant to be cruel. He'd meant to understand. And Ava Carter sat in the back of that vehicle in the snow with 7 men who now owed her their lives and the wall she'd held up her entire life. Through the mockery and the firefight and the applause and the salute finally quietly came down. "Yeah," she said. "Just that, just yeah." "His name was Ethan," she said, and her voice was different now, smaller, younger, the voice of the girl the ghost had been built to protect. "And I'm not going to tell you the rest of it in the back of a truck on Christmas Eve, because it's the worst thing that ever happened to anybody, and you don't deserve to have your Christmas ruined by it. But yeah, somebody died, and I was watching, and I was too slow, and I was a lot younger than 18. She looked out at the snow. "And every man I keep alive is me trying to buy back 1 second of being too slow, and it never works because you can't buy it back, and I know you can't, and I do it anyway." She was quiet. "That's who you've been fighting next to all day. Now you know. Can we not talk about it anymore?" And they didn't, because these were good men, hard men, men who understood grief the way only men who've buried friends understand it, and they knew when a door had been opened, as far as it was going to open, and they let it be. Turner reached back between the seats, and he put his hand on Ava's knee. Just for a second, the way you touch someone to tell them you heard them, and then he faced forward and put the vehicle in gear and drove them home through the snow, and nobody said another word. And it was the most comfortable silence Ava Carter had sat inside in years. At the 2-hour and 52-minute mark, the convoy rolled back through the gate of the base, and word had already traveled, because word always travels. And there were men standing out in the cold to watch them come in. Men who'd heard what happened in the valley, and as the vehicles pulled to a stop, Reed climbed out of the front and turned to help Ava down out of the back, an unnecessary courtesy that he did anyway because he wanted to. And the second her boots hit the ground, a voice cut across the motor pool. Carter. It wasn't a friendly voice. It was a command voice, clipped and cold, and it belonged to a man Ava had never met but recognized instantly for what he was, a senior officer higher up the chain than Hale, standing at the edge of the motor pool with 2 others behind him, and he'd clearly been waiting specifically for her. Reed stiffened. Every man on the team stiffened because they read the tone the same way Ava did. You're wanted for debrief, the officer said. Now, not with your team, alone. And Ava Carter, who had killed 15 men and saved 8 lives and held the line in a valley for 6 minutes without her hands ever shaking, felt her stomach drop in a way it hadn't dropped all day, because she knew this man's type, and she knew that voice, and she knew that the file was about to be opened, and she knew exactly what was in it. Reed stepped forward, putting himself half between them. With respect, sir, my specialist just broke a 15-man ambush, and she's been in the field for 9 hours. Her debrief can wait until she's warm and fed like everyone else's. It can't, the officer said, and he looked at Ava, and something in his eyes was not gratitude, because her debrief isn't about today. A pause. It's about 18 months ago, in a place called Kandahar Station. And what really happened to the 7 men who died there. He let that land. Isn't that right, Carter? And the entire team turned to look at Ava, and the temperature of the whole motor pool seemed to drop 10 degrees because 7 men in a place with a name. And 18 months ago, when Ava Carter would have been 16 years old, and Reed's mind was already racing back to the ridge to the shot. No classroom teaches to the girl who guarded a whole team 1 man at a time, because once, when she was too young to even be there, she'd watched someone die. Ava didn't flinch. She'd known this was coming since the moment Hale told her about the silence on the radio. She'd known it maybe since the moment she got the assignment. She lifted her chin and looked the officer dead in the eye, and when she spoke, her voice was the flat, cold, steady voice they'd all heard call out targets in the valley. The ghost voice, the voice of someone with nothing left to lose. Yes, sir, she said. That's right. And I've been waiting 18 months for somebody to finally ask me about it to my face instead of burying it in a file. She stepped forward past Reed toward the officer, small and unafraid. So let's go have that debrief. Let's talk about Kandahar Station. Let's talk about the 7 men who died. Her eyes went hard as the mountains. And let's talk about who really gave the order that killed them. Because I don't think that's the part you want in the debrief, sir. I think that's the part you've spent 18 months making sure nobody ever says out loud. The answer didn't come right away. The dead drop protocol wasn't a phone call. It was a series of relays, a message bouncing through channels designed to hide its source, and Mercer had warned them it would take time. So they waited. And waiting, Cole would learn, was its own kind of battle. How long, he asked. Could be an hour. Could be 6. Mercer set the radio down carefully as if it were something precious. Dana has to receive the signal, verify it's really me and not a trap, and then decide whether to answer. And she'll be careful because being careful is the only reason she's still alive. If she thinks for 1 second that Vance has found the dead drop and is using it to bait her out, she'll go dark and we'll never hear from her. She looked at Cole. So we wait, and while we wait, we survive, because Vance isn't waiting. She was right. She was right about everything that night, and Cole had stopped being surprised by it. Because 40 minutes after they sent the signal to Dana Mercer's head, came up sharply, and she went still in that particular way that Cole had learned meant danger. Movement, she said quietly. North, coming down out of the high country. She was already reaching for her rifle. That's not the fighters we scattered. Those men ran east and away from the mountain. This is coming from the north, from the direction of those coordinates you were sent to watch. Her jaw tightened. This is the cleanup team, Vance's people. They came faster than I thought. How many? Can't tell yet, but they're moving like professionals, not hired guns. Spread out using the terrain, no wasted motion. She turned to the team and her voice dropped into command. Listen to me, all of us. The men we fought earlier were dangerous because there were a lot of them. These men are dangerous because they're good. There won't be 40 of them. There'll be 6, maybe 8. But every one of them will be as good as the best man on your team. And they're coming here for one reason, to make sure nobody who was in this valley tonight walks out of it alive. She looked at Kessler, which means we've got a new problem. Kessler can't move, Ramirez can't fly until the storm clears, and a cleanup team is going to be on top of us before that helicopter can get here. Cole felt the trap closing again, tighter this time. So we're pinned again with a wounded man again. Not exactly, Mercer said. Last time you were in open ground with no options. This time you've got me, you've got high ground you can use, and most importantly, you've got the one thing a cleanup team never expects. She almost smiled. You've got someone who thinks exactly like they do. I spent years being the person Vance sent to erase inconvenient people. I know how these teams work because I used to be one. I know how they move, how they think, what they assume. And right now, they're assuming they're walking into a valley full of wounded, exhausted, demoralized survivors who are easy to finish off. Her eyes went hard. Let's make sure that's exactly what they think right up until the moment it kills them. What followed was a lesson in warfare that Cole would never forget as long as he lived. Because Mercer didn't just fight the cleanup team. She conducted them the way she'd conducted the whole night, turning their own professionalism into the weapon that destroyed them. She had the team leave signs of panic and disarray, a dropped weapon. Here, drag marks there, the appearance of a broken unit trying desperately to flee. She positioned Cole's people not to fight, but to hide. Tucked into cover, she chose herself, told to hold fire no matter what until she gave the word. And then she went up into the high ground alone one last time, and she waited for the professionals to walk into the trap that their own assumptions had built for them. They're going to see what looks like a wounded team trying to run, she said over the radio, her voice a whisper now. They're going to move to cut off the escape route because that's what the playbook says. And when they do, they're going to funnel right through a piece of ground I've already ranged. Nobody moves, nobody breathes loud. You let them come all the way in, and when I fire the first shot, everybody fires. Not before. The whole thing depends on them believing they're winning right up until the second they're not. Cole crouched in the cover she'd assigned him, his heart hammering, and watched the dark shapes of the cleanup team materialize out of the storm. She was right about them. He could see it in how they moved, economical, silent, deadly professionals doing a job they'd done many times before. There were 7 of them. 7 of the best killers Vance could send moving to slaughter what they believed was a broken team. They came through the funnel exactly as Mercer had predicted, and Mercer opened fire. The first man dropped before the sound of the shot even reached Cole's ears. And then everything happened at once. Cole's team opened up from 3 sides. Mercer fired from above, and the cleanup team, so confident 60 seconds ago, found themselves caught in a killing box they'd walked into, blind. But these men were not the mountain fighters from before. They didn't panic. They didn't break. Even dying, they fought back with lethal discipline, and Cole heard rounds cracking past his head, saw one of his cover positions disintegrate under return fire, and understood that even with every advantage Mercer had built, this was going to cost them. Boyd, they're trying to break. Left, cut them off. On it, Commander. Reyes, stay down. Stay down. Let Mercer work the ones in the open. They're pushing toward Kessler, Nair screamed. 2 of them. They're trying to get to Kessler. And that was the moment the whole battle balanced on a knife's edge, because 2 of the cleanup operators, realizing they were caught, had done the coldest and most professional thing possible. They'd broken toward the wounded man because killing the helpless target was the mission, and a professional completes the mission even as he dies. They moved fast, faster than Cole could react, weapons swinging toward Kessler and Nair, and Cole was too far, and Boyd was pinned. And in a fraction of a second, 2 of Vance's killers were going to murder his medic and his wounded man both. Mercer killed the first one from 400 meters away, a shot that Cole would replay in his mind for years, threading a bullet through a gap in the rocks that lasted less than a second. But the second operator reached Nair. He was on her before she could bring her rifle up, and he was bigger and stronger, and trained for exactly this. And he drove her down into the snow and got his hands on his weapon and turned it toward the helpless Kessler. And there was no shot for Mercer. No angle, nothing anyone could do. Except that Kessler, who was supposed to be helpless, who had a hole in his side and had been fading in and out of consciousness for 2 hours, reached up with the last of his strength and grabbed the barrel of the operator's weapon and shoved it into the snow at the exact moment it fired. And in the half-second of confusion that bought, Nair came up off the ground with her sidearm and put 3 rounds into the operator's chest at point-blank range. And he fell backward into the snow and did not move. The valley went silent. Nair? Cole was moving before he'd finished the word. Nair, are you hit? Talk to me. I'm okay. She was gasping, shaking, kneeling in the snow with the pistol still up. I'm okay, I'm not hit. Kessler grabbed the gun. He grabbed the gun. Oh my God. Cole reached them and dropped to his knees beside Kessler, who was gray now, gray as ash, his last reserve of strength spent on that one impossible act. Kessler, look at me. Stay with me. Told you, Kessler whispered, and there was the ghost of a smile on his bloodless lips. Told you I wasn't just gonna lay here. You crazy son of a... Cole's voice broke. Don't you dare quit on me now. That helicopter's coming. You hear me? You hold on. Trying, Commander, Kessler breathed. Trying. Cleanup team's down. Mercer's voice came over the radio tight and controlled. All 7. But listen to me. That fight cost us time and it cost us noise. And Vance is going to know within minutes that his second team failed too, which means the next thing he sends isn't going to be a team. Cole, how's your wounded man? Cole looked down at Kessler. Bad, he said quietly. He's bad, Mercer. He used everything he had left saving Nair. If that helicopter doesn't come soon, then let's get it here soon. She was already moving, coming down off the high ground toward them. The storm's breaking. I can see stars to the north. Ramirez can fly in it now if he's willing to risk it, and knowing Ramirez, he's already in the air. She reached them and knelt beside Kessler, and she looked at him with an expression Cole hadn't seen from her before, not the calm of the sniper, but something softer, something almost tender. Hey, she said quietly. Kessler, is it? You just did something most men wouldn't have the guts to do. You grabbed a live weapon with your bare hand to save your friend, and you did it while you were bleeding out. That's about the bravest thing I've seen in a long time, and I've seen a lot. She took his hand, the same hand that had grabbed the barrel. So you're going to do one more brave thing for me. You're going to hold on for about 20 more minutes until my friend Ramirez gets here in a Blackhawk to take you home. Can you do that? Kessler's eyes found hers. You're the ghost, he whispered. The one on the radio. That's me. You saved all of us. We saved each other, Mercer said. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it was always supposed to work. Her voice caught. Now hold on. 20 minutes. Don't you dare make a liar out of me, Kessler, because I told your commander every one of you was going home, and I don't break my word. And then the radio crackled, and a voice came through, and it wasn't Ramirez. It was a woman's voice, calm, careful, and shaking underneath, with an emotion so vast it could barely be contained. Ava, the voice said, if this is really you, you're going to have to prove it because I have grieved you for 4 years, and I will not survive it being a trick. So tell me something only you would know. Tell me what I said to you the last time we spoke before you got on that helicopter. Mercer went absolutely still, and then slowly she reached for the radio, and Cole watched 4 years of loneliness rise up in her face all at once. Dana, she said, and her voice so steady all night, so calm through 40 fighters and mortars and a cleanup team of professional killers, finally broke. The last thing you said to me was, don't you dare be a hero. Ava heroes come home in boxes. Just do the mob and come back to me. She swallowed. And I didn't come back. I let you grieve me for 4 years because coming back would have gotten you killed. And I am so sorry, Dana. I am so sorry for every day of it. The silence on the radio was terrible, and then Dana Okoro's voice came back, and she was weeping openly without shame. You're alive, she said. You're alive. 4 years. 4 years I thought I went to your service. Ava, I folded a flag they gave me for a coffin with nothing in it. She broke off and gathered herself, and when she spoke again, there was steel underneath the tears. Where is he? Vance? Are you telling me Vance did it again? Are you telling me he tried to do to another team what he did to us? 6 SEALs, Mercer said. He walked them into this valley the same way he walked us into ours. Bad intel on purpose. He wanted them dead so they couldn't report what's up in these mountains 6 kilometers north of me. And Donna, they're alive. All 6 of them. They're standing right here. They're witnesses. For the first time in 4 years, there are living witnesses to what Marcus Vance really is. Cole heard Dana Okoro's breath catch. Witnesses, she whispered. Living witnesses, Ava. Do you understand what that means? For 4 years, I've been sitting on everything, the intercepts, the falsified intel packages, the comms logs proving Vance cut our channels on purpose. Everything. And it was never enough because it was just my word, one grieving sergeant against a colonel and a dead operator I couldn't prove was murdered. But 6 living SEALs who can testify that Vance sent them to die. Her voice rose fierce and bright. That changes everything. That's not one voice anymore. That's a case. That's a case that ends him. That's why he's going to try to kill them all before dawn, Mercer said flatly, and the joy drained out of the moment. His first team failed. His cleanup team just failed. He's not going to send a 3rd team, Dana, because he knows now that whatever's in this valley is chewing up everything he throws at it. So he's going to do the thing Vance always does when the ground fight goes bad. She looked up at the sky where the storm was tearing apart to reveal cold, hard stars. He's going to use his authority. He's going to reach into the official channels he still controls, and he's going to task an asset that answers to the chain of command, a real one, a legitimate one. People who have no idea they're being used to murder their own, and he's going to send them here with orders that look completely legal. And those people will come because they'll be following what look like lawful orders, and they won't know they're being sent to kill 6 innocent Americans and bury the truth. The weight of it settled over the whole team. Cole felt it in his chest like a stone. So the helicopter that comes for us, he said slowly, the official one, the one that shows up after the storm clears to extract survivors of a recon mission gone wrong. Might be a rescue, Mercer said, or might be Vance's last play dressed up as a rescue carrying people who've been told you're deserters or compromised or whatever lie he needs to tell to get honest soldiers to point their weapons at you. Her eyes were grim. That's the nightmare, Cole. That's how Vance wins even when he loses. He doesn't send killers. He sends good people who've been lied to. And you can't fight good people who think they're doing their duty, not without becoming the villain in their story. Then how do we win? Reyes asked, his young voice tight. If we can't fight them, and we can't trust the rescue, and Vance controls all the official channels, how does this end any way but us dying in this valley? It was Dana who answered, and her voice had changed. The grief was gone, replaced by the cold focus of someone who had waited 4 years for this exact moment. It ends, she said, because I'm not going to let Vance control the channels. Not this time. Ava, listen to me. For 4 years, I've been building something. I couldn't act on it alone, but I built it anyway because I always believed you were alive, and I always believed this day would come. I've got a contact. Someone above Vance. Someone in the Inspector General's office who's been quietly investigating Vance for 18 months on something unrelated and who has never had the one thing that could break the case open, a witness Vance couldn't reach and couldn't kill. Her voice sharpened. I can get that investigator on a secure line in 20 minutes. And if I put 6 living SEALs in the survivor Vance thought he'd erased in front of that investigator tonight in real time, while Vance is still scrambling to figure out what went wrong, then it doesn't matter what asset Vance tasks or what lie he tells. Because the moment that investigator hears you, Vance stops being a colonel giving lawful orders and starts being a murderer, trying to silence federal witnesses. And nobody, not even Vance, can task a legitimate asset to kill federal witnesses in an active investigation. Mercer closed her eyes. You've been building this for 4 years, she said softly. For me, on the chance I was still alive. Every single day, Dana said. I never stopped. I never believed you were really gone. And I swore that if you ever came back, I'd have the weapon ready. A pause. So come back, Ava. Come all the way back. Let's finish this. Together the way we were supposed to finish it 4 years ago. Cole watched Mercer's face, and he saw something happen there that he would remember for the rest of his life. He watched a woman who had been alone for 4 years, who had made herself into a ghost, who had convinced herself that being dead was safer than being alive. Decide in that moment to live, to come back, to stop being a ghost and become a person again with a friend and a purpose and a future. Okay, Mercer said, and her voice was steady again, but it was a different kind of steady. Not the steadiness of someone with nothing left to lose, but the steadiness of someone who had just found something worth fighting for. Okay, Dana, get me the investigator. 20 minutes. I'll have the SEALs ready to testify, and I'll give the whole thing myself, everything Vance did 4 years ago on the record from a person he declared dead. She looked around at the team. But we've got a race now, because Vance is tasking his official asset right now, and if that asset gets here before Dana gets us in front of the investigator, then it doesn't matter what we can prove, because we'll be dead before we can prove it. It's the investigator against the asset, testimony against a bullet. Whoever gets here first wins. The radio crackled again, and Ramirez's voice broke through, rough and urgent. Ava, I'm 10 minutes out. I've got a window in this storm, and I'm coming in hot. Get me a landing zone and mark it. How's the wounded man? Cole looked down at Kessler, whose eyes had drifted closed, whose breathing had gone shallow and slow. Kessler, he said and shook him gently. Kessler, 10 minutes. Ramirez is 10 minutes out. Stay with me. Kessler. Kessler's eyes fluttered open. Still here, Commander, he breathed. Still here. 10 minutes, Cole said. You got 10 minutes, and then you're on a helicopter, and you're going home. Don't you quit on me now. Not gonna quit, Kessler whispered. Ghost told me not to. Can't make a liar out of the ghost. Mercer let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but her eyes were wet. She keyed the radio. Ramirez wounded man is critical but holding. LZ will be marked. But listen to me, you are not the only aircraft that might come into this valley tonight. There may be a second one behind you, official markings, and it will not be a friend. You get my wounded man and you get out fast, and you do not under any circumstances wait around. You understand in and out. What aren't you telling me, Ava? There's no time, just trust me. In and out. Copy, Ramirez said grimly. In and out. Marking my approach now. And so the race began in earnest, 3 clocks running. Down at once, Ramirez inbound to save Kessler. Dana racing to reach the investigator, and somewhere far away, Marcus Vance tasking an asset to come and bury the truth forever. Cole marked the landing zone with a chemical light, his hands steady despite everything, and he looked up at the sky where the storm was finally breaking. And he thought about how strange it was that after everything, after the 40 fighters and the mortars and the cleanup team, it might all come down to which helicopter reached them first. Mercer, he said quietly while they waited. That thing you're about to do, testify, come back from the dead on the record to the Inspector General. You know that once you do that, there's no more hiding. Vance will know you're alive. Everyone will. You'll never be a ghost again. I know, Mercer said. Are you sure? Because being a ghost kept you alive for 4 years. The second you surface, the second I surface, I become a target, Mercer said. I know. I've known it since the moment I keyed that radio for Dana. She looked at him, and there was no fear in her face, only a fierce, hard-won peace. But I've been thinking about something, Cole. All night watching your team fight, watching you refuse to leave Kessler, watching Nair save him, and Boyd talk about his daughter, and Reyes climb that mountain scared out of his mind, and do it anyway. She paused. I made myself a ghost because I thought the mission was to survive, just survive. Stay dead, stay hidden, answer a distress call. Now and then keep the ghost count from getting worse. That was the whole plan. Survive. She shook her head slowly. But that's not living, Cole. That's just refusing to die. And watching you people tonight, I remembered that there's a difference. There's a difference between surviving and living, and I've been surviving for 4 years, and I'm done. Her jaw set. So yes, I'm going to surface. I'm going to testify. I'm going to become a target. And Marcus Vance is going to spend whatever's left of his life knowing that the woman he buried came back to put him in the ground. She keyed the radio one more time. Dana, tell me you've got the investigator. There was a pause, and then Dana's voice came back tight with adrenaline. I've got him, Ava. He's on the secure line right now. He's awake. He's listening. And when I told him I had the survivor of the incident, he's been chasing for 18 months, plus 6 living SEALs who were just sent to die by the same man, Ava. He said he'd been waiting 18 months for a break like this. He's ready. He's recording. Everything from this moment on is on the official record of a federal investigation. Her voice dropped, which means the moment you start talking, you're a protected witness, and anyone who moves against you is committing a federal crime in the middle of an active case. Vance's window just closed, Ava. If we can get your testimony on the record before his asset arrives, he loses. He loses everything. Then let's not waste another second, Mercer said. She looked around at the team, at Cole, at all of them. You heard her. The moment we start talking, we're protected, but only if we finish before Vance's asset gets here. So we do this fast, and we do it now, all of us, every voice. She took a breath. Investigator, if you can hear me. My name is Captain Ava Mercer, United States Army. 4 years ago, I was declared killed in action after an operation in the mountains. That declaration was a lie. I was betrayed by Colonel Marcus Vance, who fed my team false intelligence that walked us into an ambush, killing 11 people, and then had me declared dead to bury the truth. I survived. And tonight, Colonel Vance did the exact same thing to a 6-man SEAL team in this valley for the same reason, to protect something he's hiding and to silence anyone who might discover it. I have 6 living witnesses, and I am prepared to testify to all of it right now on the record. And far above the valley, cutting through the last shreds of the breaking storm, came the sound of rotor blades, a helicopter inbound fast. But there was no way yet to tell whose it was. The words hung in the freezing air of the motor pool, and for a moment nobody moved, and the senior officer's face did something that told Ava everything she needed to know, because a man with nothing to hide gets angry when you accuse him, and a man with everything to hide goes very, very still, and this man went still. That's a serious accusation, Carter, the officer said quietly, in front of witnesses. Yes, sir, Ava said. It is. That's why I'm making it in front of witnesses. Files can be redacted, debriefs can be sealed. But 8 men who just watched me keep them alive and are standing here listening, and you can't redact a memory. She didn't blink. So do you still want to do this alone, or do you want to do it out here where everyone can hear? At the 2-hour and 58-minute mark, Mason Reed made a choice that would have consequences for the rest of his career, and he made it without hesitation. The same way he'd put an 18-year-old on a ridge that morning. Sir, Reed said, stepping up beside Ava. I'm her team lead as of this morning. Anything that gets said in her debrief, I have a right to hear, because whatever's in her file affected how I employed her in combat today. If there's something about Kandahar Station that made her the operator I watched save my team, then I need to know it, and I'm not leaving. He folded his arms. With respect. This is a classified matter, Staff Sergeant. Then classify me into it, Reed said, because I'm not going anywhere and neither is my team. And behind him, the men of SEAL Team 7 closed ranks quietly without a word. Briggs and Turner and Kim, Simon and Hale and the rest, and they formed a loose wall behind Ava Carter, and the message was unmistakable. She was one of theirs now. Whatever was in that file, they'd hear it standing next to her, or nobody would hear it at all. The officer looked at the wall of men, and Ava watched him do the calculation, watched him realize that the quiet erasure he'd been counting on for 18 months was no longer possible, that the girl he'd hoped would stay a footnote had just made herself impossible to bury by saving the lives of 8 witnesses who now refused to leave her side. Inside, the officer said, finally, his voice tight, the briefing room. All of you if you insist. But what gets said in there stays in there, and I will hold every one of you to that. Fine by me, Ava said. I'm not the one who needs it kept quiet. At the 3-hour and 11-minute mark, they were all crowded into the briefing room. The same long table where the night before the team had laughed at a girl with a rifle too big for her. And it was a very different room now. And the officer sat at one end, and Ava sat at the other. And the men of SEAL Team 7 ranged themselves along the sides like a jury. And the officer began by trying to take control of the story, which was his first mistake. 18 months ago, he said, there was an incident at a remote listening post designated Kandahar Station. 7 personnel were lost. The after-action review determined it was the result of an enemy assault that overran the position. Specialist Carter here was present as a civilian dependent, and her account of events has been, he chose the word carefully, inconsistent with the official finding, which is why her file is restricted, to protect an ongoing review. A civilian dependent, Reed repeated slowly. She was 16. What was a 16-year-old doing at a listening post in a combat zone? And there it was, the first thread, and Ava reached out and pulled it. My father was the station commander, Ava said. Her voice was flat and even, the ghost voice, but everyone in the room could hear the thing underneath it now, the thing she'd been carrying since she was 16. Master Sergeant Daniel Carter, 22 years in. He ran Kandahar Station, a listening post, 6 men and him, way out past everything. And there were no schools where we were stationed, and no family back home worth sending me to, so I lived on the post with him. Against about 6 regulations. Nobody cared because nobody thought anything would ever happen at a listening post that far from anything. She paused. My dad taught me to shoot when I was 9, not for fun, because he said if we were going to break the rules by having me out there, then I was going to know how to keep myself alive if the worst ever happened. So I shot every single day for 7 years. That's your range time, Kim. That's where the practice came from. 7 years of my father putting a rifle in my hands and saying again, Ava, again, until again was the only word my hands understood. Nobody said anything. Turner had gone very pale. On the night it happened, Ava continued, we got a warning. Signals traffic movement in the hills, the kind of thing that means an attack is coming. My father called it up the chain. He requested reinforcement or extraction or air support, anything. He said the post couldn't hold against what was coming with 7 men. Her eyes moved slowly to the officer at the end of the table, and somebody up the chain told him to hold position, told him it was probably nothing, told him that pulling assets to reinforce a listening post over unconfirmed traffic would look bad, cost money, raise questions. Her voice never rose, and that was what made it terrible. Told him to sit tight and wait for confirmation. And the confirmation, sir, arrived at 0200 in the form of 40 men coming over the wire. The officer's jaw was a hard line. The decision not to reinforce was made on available intelligence, which at the time was, I was in the comms room. Ava cut across him, and now for the first time there was heat in her voice, real heat, 18 months of it. I was 16 years old and I was sitting in the comms room next to my father, and I heard the call. I heard the voice on the other end tell him to hold. I heard my father beg. Master Sergeant Daniel Carter, 22 years, a man who never begged for anything in his life. I heard him beg for his men. And I heard the voice on the other end say, and I will remember this until I die. I heard it say, quote, we're not going to deploy a reaction force to babysit a listening post on your gut feeling. Carter, hold your position. Her hands were flat on the table and they were not shaking, and that was somehow worse than if they had been. Babysit. That was the word. That's why I didn't react last night, Briggs, when you called me a babysitting job. You want to know why I just watched you? Because I'd heard that word before in that room, right before 6 men and my father died. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. But that's why. Briggs made it sound like he'd been hit and put his face in his hands. At the 3-hour and 24-minute mark, the room was so quiet you could hear the wind against the walls, and Ava kept going because the door was open now, and everything was coming through it, 18 months of it, and she wasn't going to stop until it was all out on that table. They came at 0200, and she said, and 40 of them. 7 of us, if you count me, and my father did not count me. My father put me in the comms room and told me to lock the door and not come out no matter what I heard, and I did not listen to him because I never listened to him, and that is the only reason I'm alive. Her voice was steady and awful. I got up on the roof with my rifle. My father didn't know. And for 4 hours, I did the thing you all watched me do today. I watched each of the 6 men on that wall one at a time, and I killed whoever was about to kill them, and I kept them alive as long as I could. I was 16, and I held. I held the way I told you I hold Reed. I don't break. I learned that on that roof. Reed closed his eyes. But there were 40 of them, and one of me, and eventually, Ava's voice finally caught just slightly, just for a word. Eventually, I couldn't be everywhere. I could only keep a scope on one man at a time. And while I was keeping my brother, Ethan, alive on the east wall, they came over the west and they got to my father. She stopped. She breathed. She made herself say it. Ethan was 17. My brother, he was 17 years old, and I saved his life 4 times that night. And the 5th time I was watching my father instead, and when I turned back, Ethan was already gone. And when I turned to my father, he was already gone too because I can only look at one man at a time. And that night I had to choose over and over which of the people I loved I was going to watch die while I saved the other one. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I chose wrong. Both times. That's the thing nobody understands. There was no right choice. There was only which one I'd have to watch. And I've watched it every single night since. The silence in that room was total. 6 men died on that wall, Aviva said, gathering herself, the flatness coming back like armor. My father, my brother, and 4 others, good men who taught me to field strip a rifle and cheated at cards and let a lonely kid tag along because I had nowhere else to be. 7 if you count the radio operator who died at his post trying to raise the reaction force that never came. 7 men. And I was the only one who walked out because I was on a roof they didn't check. And when the sun came up and the reaction force finally rolled in, 4 hours too late, they found a 16-year-old girl sitting on a roof with an empty rifle and 31 enemy dead in the wire, and they did not know what to do with me. At the 3-hour and 39-minute mark, she turned the full weight of her attention on the officer at the end of the table, and everyone in the room turned with her. And here's the part you don't want in the debrief, sir, Ava said. When they pulled me off that roof, I was still holding the radio log, the paper log, because in the comms room before I went up top, I tore the page out of the log, the page with the timestamp and the transcript of the order to hold, the order that killed my father and my brother and five other men. I took it because even at 16, even in that moment, some part of me knew that the people who gave that order were going to try to make it disappear. Her voice was ice, and I was right. Within a week, the official finding was written. Enemy assault position overrun, tragic loss, nobody's fault. The request for reinforcement was gone from the record. The order to hold was gone. It was like it never happened. 7 men died because somebody didn't want to spend the money and take the risk to save a listening post. And the record was cleaned up so neat that when I told the truth, I was the one who looked crazy. A traumatized 16-year-old girl with a wild story and no evidence. She leaned forward, except I had the page. And I still have it. It's not on this base and it's not anywhere you can get to, but it exists and it has your predecessor's authorization code on it, and it has the name of the officer who relayed the order. A pause, and I'm looking at him. The officer's face went gray. You were the relay, Reed said slowly, staring at the man. 18 months ago, you weren't the one who made the decision, but you were the one who passed it down. You were the voice on the radio. You said the word, babysit. I passed down an order I received, the officer said, and his voice had lost all its command edge, and now it was just a man trying to survive. That's the chain. That's how it works. I didn't make the call. I relayed it. I don't set the... You said babysit, Ava said. Nobody ordered you to say babysit. That word was yours. You added that yourself. You could have relayed hold your position and it would have been the same terrible order, and my father would have died the same way. But you looked at 7 men in a combat zone begging for their lives, and you called them a babysitting job, and that word was a choice, and you made it. She stood up. I don't blame you for the order. I've had 18 months to understand that the order came from above you, and you were a coward who passed it down instead of pushing back. And cowardice isn't the same as murder, and I know the difference now. But I will never forgive you for the word, because the word meant you thought their lives were beneath the cost of saving them. And that word is the reason a 16-year-old girl had to choose which of her family to watch die. At the 3-hour and 51-minute mark, the officer tried one last time to take back control, and it was pathetic, and everyone in the room could see it was pathetic. Carter, whatever you think you have, whatever page you think you kept, it doesn't change the official finding, and pursuing this will destroy your career before it starts. You're an 18-year-old with a bright future. Nobody wants to hear a story like this. It embarrasses people with the power to bury you. My advice, and it's good advice, is to take today's win, take whatever medal they're going to try to give you, and let the past stay buried, for your own sake. And Ava Carter looked at him, and then she looked around the table at the men of SEAL Team 7, at Reed and Briggs, and Turner, and Kim and Hale, and something happened in her face that none of them had seen all day. Not in the firefight, not in the debrief, not at any point since she'd walked through that door. She smiled. It was small and it was tired, and it was the saddest smile any of them had ever seen, but it was real. You know what's funny, she said quietly. For 18 months, that's exactly what I was going to do. Take the win, stay quiet, let it stay buried. Because you were right about one thing, nobody wanted to hear it. And I was so tired and I'd already lost everything. And what was the point of burning down my future for 7 men who were already dead? She looked at the officer. That's why I took this assignment. This exact one. The worst convoy of the year on Christmas Eve with a team that did not want me. Because I decided I was just going to disappear into the work. Become the ghost. Never let anybody close. Never tell anybody anything. Just keep people alive one at a time forever. And never ever have to choose again. And never have to explain why I couldn't. Her voice softened. That was the plan. She turned and looked at her team. And then these idiots happened, she said. And there was something in her voice now that wasn't the ghost. Something warmer. Something that had been buried longer than any radio log. I walked in last night planning to keep every one of you at arm's length for the rest of the deployment. And instead a man ran into a machine gun because I told him to trust me. And another man told me about his 4-year-old daughter. And a whole team put themselves between me and a senior officer 20 minutes ago because they decided I was one of theirs. She looked back at the officer and the smile was gone and the mountains were back in her eyes. You told me to let it stay buried for my own sake, but I don't have a self anymore that's separate from these men. That's what you don't understand. You think I've got a future to protect. I don't. I've got a team. And a team doesn't let the truth stay buried when the truth is that 7 men died because somebody thought their lives were a babysitting job. So no, I'm not taking the win and staying quiet. I'm going to tell it. All of it. And I've got 8 witnesses and a radio log with your name on it, and there is nothing you can do to bury it this time. At the 4-hour and 4-minute mark, the officer stood up, and for a second it looked like he might say something, might threaten, might beg, might do any of the things cornered men do. And instead, he just looked at the wall of faces arrayed against him at 8 operators who would testify to every word, and he understood that he had lost that the thing he'd kept buried for 18 months had walked into his base carrying a rifle too big for her and dug itself back up in a single day. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, Ava said. For 18 months, staying quiet was the mistake. I'm finally fixing it. The officer left. He didn't salute anybody. He just walked out and the door shut behind him, and for a long moment the room was silent. And then Briggs, who had not said a word since Ava explained the word babysit, stood up and his face was wet and he did not care who saw it. I called you that, he said, his voice cracking. Last night, the exact word, a babysitting job. I said it to your face and I laughed. And you just stood there and took it, and I thought you were taking it because you didn't have a comeback, and the whole time you were taking it because it was the word that killed your father. He wiped his face with both hands. Ava, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. If I'd known. You couldn't have known, Ava said gently. That's the point. You couldn't have known, and you said it anyway because it was cruel and easy. And then this morning you ran into a machine gun for me. That's who you are, Briggs. You're a man who says the cruel, easy thing and then runs into a machine gun to make it right. I'll take that man on my team any day of the week. Don't you dare spend the rest of this deployment hating yourself. I've spent 18 months hating myself. It doesn't help. It doesn't bring anybody back. It just makes you slower. She almost smiled again. And you can't afford to be slower. I need you fast. I need all of you fast. That's the only way this works. That's the only way we all keep going home. At the 4-hour and 16-minute mark, Reed stood up and he walked the length of the table and he stopped in front of Ava and he looked at this 18-year-old who was not 18, who had held a wall at 16 and chosen which of her family to watch die and carried the proof of a crime for a year and a half, waiting for a chance to tell the truth. And he did not know what to say because there were no words big enough. So he did the only thing that felt true. He came to attention and he saluted her. And every man in that room stood up and every man in that room came to attention. And every man in that room saluted Ava Carter, the entire team all at once. The officer and the enlisted, the men she'd saved, and the men who doubted her, standing in the same room where they'd laughed at her the night before, saluting her now with tears on more than one face. And Ava Carter stood there, small in her gear, and this time she did not tell them to stop. This time she did not say, "You don't have to do that." This time she understood finally what Doyle had meant at the outpost, what Briggs had meant, that being honored by people who chose to honor you was the heaviest and most precious thing in the world, and that the only thing you could do with it was receive it. So she received it. She stood at attention and she let them salute her, and she let the tears come, finally after 18 months in a warm room, surrounded by men who had decided she was one of their own, and she did not wipe them away. At the 4-hour and 31-minute mark, when it was over, when the salutes had come down and the room had gone quiet and warm, Reed put his hand on her shoulder. "The Bronze Star," he said, "they're going to try to give it to you. For today." "I already heard Command talking about it before we even got back." "I know," Ava said. "You should take it." "I'm not going to take it," Ava said, and there was no hesitation in it, and Reed wasn't surprised. "Why not?" "You earned it 10 times over." Ava was quiet for a moment, looking around the room at the faces of the men. "Because a medal is a thing they give one person," she said finally. "It's got my name on it and nobody else's. It separates me. It puts me up on a stand alone, the special one, the hero, and it takes me out of the line and stands me apart from everybody." She shook her head slowly. "I've spent my whole life apart, 16 years an outsider on a listening post, 18 months a ghost with a redacted file, and I walked in here last night planning to stay apart forever. And today, for the first time since the roof, I wasn't apart. For the first time since I was 16, I was part of something. I was in the line, not above it. I was one of the team." Her voice was thick. "I'm not trading that for a medal. I'm not letting them pull me out of the line and stand me on a box by myself, even to honor me, especially to honor me. Because the box is just another kind of alone, and I am so tired of being alone." She looked at Reed. "I wasn't special out there. I was part of the team. That's the only thing I want on any record anywhere. Not a medal with my name on it. Just that. She was part of the team." Reed looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly because he understood, and because it was maybe the most that any of them would ever understand her. "Part of the team," he said. "Yeah, okay, Carter. Part of the team." At the 4-hour and 44-minute mark, the door opened, and it was Christmas morning. Now the sky finally gray with the first real light in days, the storm finally breaking, and Hale came in from having been on the radio, and his face was strange, complicated, and everyone turned to him. "That officer," Hale said. "The relay? He's already gone. Requested immediate transfer off the base an hour ago, effective at once. Didn't wait for morning." He paused. "And there's more. Command called back. They've reopened the Kandahar Station review. Formally, as of 20 minutes ago." He looked at Ava. "Carter, they want your statement. The real one, on the record. And they want the log page." His voice was careful. "Somebody up there decided that 8 sworn witnesses in a documented radio log is a lot harder to bury than one traumatized teenager. You did it. You actually had to eat them. 18 months and you cracked it open in one day." Ava sat down slowly, like her legs had decided all at once that they were done, and she put her face in her hands, and for a moment nobody could tell if she was laughing or crying, and then it became clear it was both. "My dad," she said into her hands, "my dad's name gets cleared. The finding gets changed. It won't say he failed to hold. It'll say he begged for help and didn't get it. It'll say the truth." She looked up, and her face was wrecked and shining. "Do you understand what that means? For 18 months, the official record has said my father lost his post. Failed, and it wasn't true, and I couldn't fix it, and now," her voice broke completely, "now it's going to say the truth. And he's going to be what he actually was. He's going to be a man who did everything right and got sold out by a coward with a radio. He's going to get his name back." And the men of SEAL Team 7 who had woken up on the 23rd believing they'd been saddled with a babysitting job gathered around an 18-year-old girl on Christmas morning while she wept for a father whose name she just cleared, and Briggs sat down on one side of her and Turner on the other, and Reed stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder, and Kim, cradling his wounded arm, said quietly, "Merry Christmas, Ava," and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. At the 4-hour and 58-minute mark, the extraction bird that had been fogged out for days finally lifted off from the pad outside to carry the wounded, and the reports back to the rear and through the window. They could all hear it climbing into the clearing sky, and Ava Carter stood and wiped her face and looked out at the light finally breaking over the mountains that had tried to kill them all the day before. And for the first time in 18 months, the weight in her chest was not gone. It would never be gone, but it was lighter because she was not carrying it alone anymore. She reached into her jacket into the inside pocket and she pulled out the letter. Her mother's letter. Come home for Christmas. The one she'd read 3 times in the annex her first night and folded away because home was not an option. She looked at it for a long time, and then for the first time, she did not fold it away. Read, she said quietly, not turning around. When the bird comes back, is there a way to get mail out on it? There's a way, Reed said. I need to write a letter, Ava said. To my mother. I haven't written her back in 18 months. She thinks she lost her whole family that night. Her husband, her son. Ava's voice was very quiet. She doesn't know she's still got a daughter because her daughter's been a ghost with a redacted file who couldn't come home because coming home meant explaining why she was the only one who walked out and she couldn't do it. She turned around and there were tears on her face, but she was steady. But I can do it now. I can tell her the truth. I can tell her dad's name is getting cleared. And I can tell her, her voice caught, I can tell her I'm coming home. When this deployment ends, I can finally tell her I'm coming home. Because it's the right thing, Ava finished. And because you owe it to 7 dead men, and you've owed it for 18 months, and some debts you don't get to walk away from just because paying them costs you your comfortable life. Colonel Aldridge stood in the middle of his own office, a man who outranked everyone in the room, and he had nothing left. No command in his voice, no paper to hide behind, just the truth finally sitting in the open where he'd spent 18 months making sure it could never go. And if I don't, he asked quietly. It wasn't defiance, it was the last question of a drowning man. Then Lieutenant Hale's recording makes the choice for you, Reed said. Either way, the truth comes out. The only thing you get to decide, sir, is whether you come out of this as a man who finally did the right thing or a man who had to be dragged into it kicking. That's the whole choice left to you. Carter's giving you the better one. I wouldn't have, so I'd take it if I were you. There was a long silence. And then Colonel Aldridge sat down heavily in his chair, and he put his face in his hands, and something in him broke the way a thing breaks when it's been held up under false pressure for too long, and when he lifted his head, his eyes were wet, and something in them had changed. His reposition request is still in my classified files, he said, and his voice was hollow and steady, now the voice of a man who'd stopped running. Time-stamped. My denial is attached to it in my own hand. I never destroyed it. I told myself I kept it for the record. He let out a broken breath. That was a lie. I kept it because some part of me always knew this day would come, and I wanted the truth to survive me, even when I didn't have the courage to speak it. Ethan Vance requested reinforcement and repositioning. 96 hours before the attack, citing specific credible intelligence, and I denied it, and I documented why, and the why was not tactical. He looked at Ava. I'll give you everything. The request, the denial, my statement, all of it. Ethan Vance was right, and I was a coward, and 7 men are dead because of me, and it's past time. The record said so in words. He paused. You have more of his decency in you than I have in my whole life, Carter. He'd be proud of you. I have no right to say that, but it's true. Ava didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the man who had haunted 18 months of her nightmares had just said the one thing she'd needed and never expected that Ethan would be proud. And hearing it from that mouth of all mouths cracked something loose in her chest that had been fused shut since she was 16 years old. At the 3-hour and 12-minute mark on Christmas morning now, because the debrief had run past midnight, Ava Carter walked out of that office into a hallway where the entire team was waiting, all of them, because none of them had gone to bed. Because you don't go to bed when one of your own is inside a room fighting for something. And when the door opened and she stepped out, Briggs was on his feet first. Well, he said. Ava looked at them. Reed and Hale came out behind her, and Reed gave the smallest nod, and that was all the team needed. The truth's coming out, Ava said quietly. About all of it. Kandahar Station. Ethan, the 7 men, the order. Her voice was unsteady in a way they'd never heard. His request survived. Aldridge kept it. It's real, it's documented, and it's going to be entered into the record. They died heroes, and now everyone's going to know they died heroes and know why they didn't have to. She stopped. It's over. It's actually over. After 18 months, it's over. And SEAL Team 7 did something then that soldiers rarely do. They crowded in around her, all of them, This circle of hard men who a day earlier had laughed at a Christmas mistake, and they didn't say anything clever, and they didn't make a speech. They just closed the circle around her hands, on her shoulders, on her back, surrounding her the way they'd surround a wounded brother, and Ava Carter, who had not let anyone hold her since she was 16 years old in a supply bunker, stood in the middle of it and let them. Ethan Vance, Turner said quietly. We're going to remember that name, all of us. You told us his name in the truck and we're never going to forget it. He kept you alive so you could keep us alive. That means he saved every one of us too from 18 months and a whole world away. He swallowed hard. So he's ours now too. That okay with you? An Ava Carter ghost of Christmas Eve killer of 15 men and a valley holder of the line finally completely broke, and she cried in the middle of a circle of men who would never let anyone see her do it. And that was the whole point, that they'd made a place where she was finally allowed to. At the 3-hour and 40-minute mark, the base was quiet, the way bases get quiet in the small hours of Christmas morning, and Reed found Ava alone again at the edge of things, but a different edge now, because now the edge was where she'd gone to catch her breath instead of to hide. There's a senior commander flying in later this morning, Reed said, sitting down beside her. Word traveled fast. What you did in the valley, 15 hostiles, 0 friendly, killed a suicide walker, stopped cold. That doesn't stay quiet no matter how many files somebody redacts. He paused. He's bringing a Bronze Star Carter. For you, for today. Ava was quiet. I don't want it, she said. Reed looked at her. You earned it about 10 times over. I know I earned it, Ava said, and there was no false modesty in it, because false modesty had never been one of her sins. That's not why I don't want it. I don't want it because a medal is a thing they pin on one person and pull them out of the line. They stand you up in front of everybody and they say, this one was special. This one was different from the rest of you. She shook her head slowly. I spent 18 months as a ghost, a file that only existed when somebody looked at it, a person nobody was allowed to know about, separate, alone, special in the worst possible way. Her voice was steady, and today, for the first time since Ethan died, I wasn't separate. I was on a team. I was one of 8. When I called out a target, someone took the shot. When Briggs ran at that gun, he ran on my word. When the walker came down, I was covering my people, not defending a bunker alone. For 6 minutes in that valley, and for 1 hour in that hallway, I wasn't a ghost. I was part of something. She looked at Reed. If I take that medal, I'm a ghost again. I'm the special one, the one they single out. And I would rather be one of 8 ordinary men than the most decorated ghost in the whole military. So no, I don't want it. I want to stay in the line. Reed was quiet for a long moment. And then he nodded slowly, because he understood more than she knew, because he'd kept a ledger of lost men for 11 years, and he knew exactly what it cost to be the one who's set apart. You're going to have to tell the commander that yourself, he said. He's not going to understand it. Nobody refuses a Bronze Star. Then I'll teach him something new, Ava said, and for the first time all day, there was something in her voice that was almost light. At the 4-hour and 30-minute mark on Christmas morning, the senior commander did arrive, and he did bring the Bronze Star, and Ava Carter stood at attention in front of him with the whole team assembled, and she refused it, and it played out exactly as Reed had predicted, with the commander not understanding and asking her to reconsider, and telling her that this was one of the most extraordinary actions he'd reviewed in his career, and that she was throwing away an honor most soldiers would give anything for. With respect, sir, Ava said, I'm not throwing it away. I'm giving it back to where it belongs. She stood straight. If you want to give a medal for what happened in that valley, give it to the team. All of them, because I didn't hold that line alone. Kim killed 2 flankers on my count. Briggs ran into a machine gun on my word so I could kill the gunner. Turner drove wounded men to safety. Every one of them did their job so I could do mine. Her voice was clear and carrying. I wasn't special, sir. I was just part of the team. And the whole reason I fought the way I fought is because for the first time in a long time, I had a team to fight for. So if there's honor to give it to the thing that made me who I was today. Give it to them, not to me. The commander stared at her for a long moment, and then something in his hard old face softened, and he lowered the box with the medal in it, and he looked around at the team standing behind her, and he understood the way old soldiers eventually understand the things that matter. You know, he said quietly, in 40 years, I've pinned that medal on a lot of chests, and I don't think I've ever heard a better reason to refuse it. He closed the box. Request granted, Carter. The team gets a unit citation, and you get to stay exactly where you want to be. He paused, and then he added gruffly, Sergeant Vance taught you well. I read the summary on the way in. He'd have been proud of that answer. That was the answer of a soldier who understands what the uniform is actually for. And Ava Carter, hearing Ethan's name spoken with honor by a commander who'd flown in at dawn, felt the last piece of the weight she'd carried since she was 16 finally quietly lift. In the days that followed, everything changed, and it changed fast, the way things change when the truth finally comes out after being held back too long. Kandahar Station was reopened officially formally, and the 7 men who died there were reclassified from casualties of overwhelming force to what they actually were, defenders, who held an indefensible position because the reinforcement they requested was denied. Their families were told the truth. Ethan Vance's mother, who had spent 18 months believing her son died in a chaotic overrun, received a letter and then a visit explaining that her son had seen the attack coming, had tried to save his men, had died coming back for a frightened 16-year-old girl, and had been right about everything while the men above him were wrong. Colonel Aldridge gave his statement in full in his own words, and he accepted what came, and what came was the end of his career, but he faced it standing up, which was more than the man who denied the reposition request would have been capable of. And maybe that was Ethan's last lesson, reaching one more person through the girl he'd trained. And Ava Carter stopped being a ghost. The redactions came off her file, at least the ones that had been hiding a crime instead of protecting an operation. She stopped being a problem that only existed when someone looked at her. She became simply a member of SEAL Team 7, which had never had an official sniper attachment before, and now could not imagine operating without one. At the 2-week mark back at the base, the team did something for her. They'd been planning it quietly, the way men plan things when they're not sure how the person will react, and one evening they called her into the operations building, the same room where she'd first walked in and been laughed at, and this time when she came through the door, nobody laughed, and there was a long case sitting on the table. Open it, Briggs said. Ava opened it. Inside was a rifle, not a standard issue rifle, a custom precision rifle built and fitted and tuned with her name engraved along the receiver, and beside her name 3 more words. And when Ava read those 3 words, her hands went still. Ghost of Christmas Eve, she read aloud very quietly. That's what they're calling you now, Kim said. The whole base. Word got around about the valley and somebody started calling you the Ghost of Christmas Eve, and it stuck. He grinned. So we figured if you're going to be a ghost, you should at least be our ghost. On the record. In writing. Engraved so nobody can ever redact it. We had a whole speech planned, Turner said. Briggs wrote it. It was terrible, so we're not going to do the speech. He looked at her, and his voice got serious. We're just going to say this. 2 weeks ago, you walked in here, and we called you a babysitting job and a Christmas mistake, and you didn't say a word. You just went out into that valley, and you held the line, and you kept every single one of us breathing. And then you walked into a room and faced down a colonel to get 7 dead men their honor back, and you did all of it without asking anybody for anything. He paused. So this rifle isn't a thank you. Thank you's too small. This rifle is us saying you're one of us, permanently. Not an attachment, not a specialist they loaned us. One of us. Ghost of Christmas Eve, SEAL Team 7. That's who you are now if you want it. And Ava Carter stood there holding a rifle with her name and her ghost engraved on it, in the same room where a day that felt like a lifetime ago, she'd let a room full of strangers laugh at her, and she understood that she'd finally found the thing she'd been chasing since she climbed up to that firing slit in a supply bunker at 16 years old. Not revenge. She'd let that go in Aldridge's office. Not even the truth, though the truth mattered more than she could say. What she'd found was a family, a second one, built out of the same materials as the first, kindness and shared danger, and men who taught her things and stood beside her when it counted, and this time she hadn't had to lose it to understand what it was worth. Jake, she said, and it was the first time she'd used any of their first names. Your speech wasn't terrible. That was the second half of it, and it was fine. She closed the case gently. I want it. Of course I want it. I've wanted it my whole life. I just stopped letting myself believe I was allowed to have it. She looked around at all of them. Thank you for seeing me. It took you about 12 hours in a firefight, but you got there faster than most people ever do. 12 hours, Briggs said, wiping at his face and pretending he wasn't. She saved our lives and ruined our egos in one night, and now she's making fun of how long it took us to notice. Yeah, she's one of us, all right. That night, alone in the annex, in the same spot where she'd sat and read her mother's letter and folded it away because home was no longer an option. Ava Carter took the letter out again. She'd carried it for weeks. She'd read it 100 times and never answered it because answering it meant hoping, and she hadn't been able to survive hoping. But something was different now. She unfolded it and she read it one more time. Come home for Christmas. Whatever happened, whatever you think you did, it doesn't matter. You have a home. You have a mother who loves you. Please, baby, come home. And for 18 months, Ava had believed she couldn't answer it because she'd carried a secret she wasn't allowed to speak. And how do you go home to your mother when you can't tell her why you left, when the truth of the worst night of your life is buried under a stack of redactions in a signature you gave when you were 16 and broken? How do you sit at a Christmas table carrying that? You don't. So she'd run instead. She'd become a ghost because a ghost doesn't have to explain itself, and a ghost doesn't have to go home. But the secret wasn't a secret anymore. The truth was out. Ethan had his honor, the 7 men had their names, Aldridge had answered for what he did, and Ava Carter didn't have to carry it alone in the dark anymore because a team had gathered around her and made it theirs too, and because the weight that had kept her from her mother's door was finally actually gone. She picked up a pen, and for the first time in 18 months, Ava Carter wrote back to her mother. She didn't tell her everything. Some of it would keep until she could say it face to face in a kitchen, with time the way hard truths are supposed to be told. But she told her the thing that mattered. She told her she was safe. She told her she'd found people who saw her. She told her she wasn't running anymore and she wasn't lost anymore, and that she finally understood what Ethan had been trying to teach her that whole summer, which was that surviving isn't the same as living, and that she'd spent 18 months mistaking one for the other, and that she was ready to stop. And she told her she was coming home. Not for this Christmas, the letter would reach her too late for that, but for the next one, and every one after. She signed it and she folded it, and this time she didn't tuck it away into the dark. She set it out where she'd see it in the morning ready to send. And then Ava Carter picked up her new rifle, the one with her name and her ghost engraved on it, and she walked outside into the cold where across the base the Christmas lights that had been strung up before the deployment were flickering back on one string at a time, warm and small against the dark, and she stood there in the snow and let herself look at them. Not as a symbol of a holiday she'd spent alone for too long, not as something she was locked outside of watching other people have, but as something she was finally permanently part of. She was not the attachment they didn't want. She was not a babysitting job or a Christmas mistake or a redacted file that only existed when someone looked at it. She was Ava Carter, ghost of Christmas Eve, a sniper who held a line so 8 men could go home, a 16-year-old who once picked up a rifle in the dark and never forgave herself, and a woman who had finally, after 18 months of running, been forgiven by a team, by a colonel, by Ethan's memory, and at last, hardest of all, by herself. The girl who observed too much had finally let herself be seen. The ghost had come home, and Ava Carter, standing in the snow beneath the flickering Christmas lights, with a family at her back and a purpose in her hands, understood one thing with total certainty, the way she understood the flight of a bullet or the fear in a man's face. She would never be alone in the dark again.